I guess I really like FNAF reactions in the dark too. It's cool. And story, like where everything is. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, got a new mic. Got it thinking it would capture my voice better, maybe not capture the background sounds. I don't know what I think about it so far. Quality wise, I think my other mic was better, but I don't know who I'm talking to. I gotta rewind this. I was watching a little bit before I started this, so I was like, I'm gonna react to it and get the camera. Okay. I guess let's watch this video back to see how I like it. So. That was stupid. Got it. Remember those games? The rabbit game. That's the first game I dreaded. What the heck? That's why I sold Among Us.
Sus.
What?
Among Us.
What the heck was that? That was hilarious. I love random things. I like you to do something so random. Spam call. Hey, Toy Bunny and Big Bunny. With no face. Why do they think it's faithful? That's kind of sad. You get the worst of all four of them, I think. Well, him and Chica, I think, got the worst of it. Foxy and Freddy almost still looked identical, almost. Just want some pizza. Why do I keep seeing the Squidward commercial?
My name is Squidward, and I am...
What? Different language. How good the chicken?
Tomei o cu.
You wanted a hug. Hey, the Bloom kid, the Bloom boy, the minigame.
Blá blá blá.
Bom galerinha, e o vídeo de hoje vai ficando por aqui. Essa animação já tinha sido feita por outra pessoa, mas como foi há mais de 5 anos atrás, a animação era bem antiga. Eu decidi refazer ela, usando os modelos atuais e mais atualizados de FNAF. Se você quiser assistir a animação original, vou deixar o link aí na descrição. Tentei também melhorar ela e deixar o mais bonito possível. Então eu espero que vocês tenham curtido. Demorei exatos 26 dias para terminar esse vídeo. Então se você gostou, por favor, tenha a consideração de deixar seu like, compartilhe o vídeo com seus amigos. E se é novo por aqui, caiu de paraquedas no canal, seja muito bem-vindo. Aqui temos vídeos novos toda semana, então não se esqueça de se inscrever. Recentemente alcançamos 20 mil inscritos, e agora estamos quase atingindo a meta de 30 mil, então nos dê uma força se inscrevendo no canal. Ative o sino das notificações, para não perder nada que está rolando por aqui. Se você quiser dar uma ajuda financeira para o canal, desça a sua tela, e clique no botão de Seja Membro. Os membros do canal têm acesso a conteúdos exclusivos, incluindo até tutoriais de animação em 3D, para vocês aprenderem a fazer animações igual eu. Muito obrigado a quem já é membro. Deixo aqui meus agradecimentos a eles. Siga nossas redes sociais para não perder nenhuma novidade. Às vezes eu acabo avisando vocês por lá e não por aqui no YouTube, então não se esqueça de nos seguir. Temos um servidor no Discord, o link está aí na descrição. Então é isso, vou ficando por aqui. Valeu, falou, fui, tchau.
Hi.
Pois é minha rapaziada, estamos de volta ao inferno. O Gregory achou que as mães fogosas e solteiras a 2 quilômetros de distância era real. E por causa dessa jiboia de merda, com CPF registrado que ele pariu, eu tive que voltar pro Pizzaplex, que está todo destruído, por causa de um terremoto. Meus parabéns, Gregório.
I don't get it. Why would Gregory tell me to come to this old place and then not be here?
Papo reto, o Gregory devia estar muito dodói da cabeça pra ter voltado aqui.
Você é completamente louco.
Vai entender, a gente brinca né e tals, mas só Deus sabe como tá a mente do palhaço. Eu estou bem errado, salgado. Por... Até agora tá tudo
I don't know about this one. That'll be like the other one, but no. How long is this? An 8-hour video?
Matters. Like I said earlier, if you choose to salvage all the animatronics, then they attack you at night, making it harder to get your job done. If you salvage all 4 animatronics, and all
Today we end the torment. 19 books, 11 games, 8 whole years, all leading to this moment. The ultimate FNAF timeline is finally complete. The pieces are in place for us. Now all we have to do is put this story of tragedy, jealousy, and loss back together. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theater! It's the class project that I admit, kinda nervous. Crying Child, Afton coming back was actually a surprise, and Fazgoo wasn't a phrase I'd ever thought I'd have to utter. But since the last time I did something like this, we've had 3 more massive games, the death and revival of the FNAF movie, and more robot kids than you can shake a staff bot at. It is exhausting trying to keep track of this whole franchise, which honestly is why I'm here today. The lore at this point is complicated. It is full of speculation and theory, so to hopefully make it a little easier for everyone and to give us all a baseline to talk about this franchise moving forward into the future, it's time to reveal my current working FNAF timeline. But just before I do, I just want to explain a couple of things. First, this timeline is massive. Seriously, it is huge. This thing towers over...
Let me see one more recent, maybe 3 months ago. This is the one I think I seen earlier.
I present to you the story of a loving, obsessive father who slowly descended into madness, and along the way discovered the secret to eternal life. Our story begins not in the 1980s, or even in the 1970s, but all the way back in the 1930s. It was the throes of the Great Depression, and people were in desperate need of cheap entertainment, especially in Utah, one of the states hit hardest, 4th highest unemployment in the nation, and full of transients. People looking for work in Salt Lake, finding none, and ultimately moving on to find their fortunes out in California. People were tired and they were hungry, but as they traveled, there was one thing that could lift their spirits. A simple roadside attraction called Fredbear's Singin' Show. The ads were plastered all over town, featuring an animated bear drawn in the popular pie-eyed cartoon style for characters at the time. He resembled cartoons like Mickey Mouse, Felix the Cat, Betty Boop. It immediately said that this, Fredbear's, was a place where you could bring the family. And the price, honestly, couldn't be beat. For 50 cents, you could get food and entertainment as you watched the local trained real-life dancing bear perform on stage. Normally, you only got to see dancing bears at large traveling circuses like Barnum and Bailey, where the tickets would go for about $1. That's $1 without about food. But this was a smaller show, like the type from the Von Brothers or the Robbins Brothers, where tickets would sell for just a mere 50 cents. Watching that bear do tricks on stage brought a glimmer of joy at a time when so much was wrong with the world. The simple show would go on for years, bringing happiness to hundreds of travelers passing through looking for a quick meal. But it left a permanent impression on one little boy, capturing his imagination in a way that nothing else had. One little boy named Billy. That was his nickname at least, but his parents liked to call him William Afton. The bear could dance, it could sing. For decades, William dreamed of recreating that moment of bringing a musical bear to life, but how? William was smart, without a doubt, and he had a keen mind for business, but he wasn't the most creative. How do you make a singing, dancing bear come to life? The best he could do was using rudimentary costumes. We know, based on the retro poster that was hidden in Security Breach, that at least at one point, Fredbear was an actual bear. Dancing bear shows were a real form of entertainment. The only problem is that, timing-wise, none of our main characters would be the people in charge of that business in the 30s, and a series of pizza restaurants in the 80s without him just being extremely old. Best case scenario, if Afton's running the singing show when he's 18, that still puts him at nearly 70 when the first pizzeria opens and his murder spree begins. That just doesn't make a lot of logical sense because he doesn't become immortal until his first death in Springtrap. That's why I suspect that Fredbear's singing show was either a family business that Afton then carried on to a new generation, or something that he saw as a kid and just wanted to recreate when he grew up. William was inspired by the work of Walt Disney, who throughout the 50s and 60s was pioneering the use of mascot suits throughout his theme park. The big innovation? Suits with 5 fingers. This allowed the performers wearing the suits to use their natural arms and hands to interact with the guests, as opposed to the older models where the arms would just hang limply by their sides. Finally, with a simple mascot suit, he would be able to realize his childhood dream. He would be able to bring Fredbear to life. To appeal to the kids, and for copyright reasons, he changed Fredbear from a realistic brown animal to a cartoonish yellow bear with a purple hat and bow tie. But feeling like one character wasn't enough, he added another friend, a yellow rabbit with a purple vest and matching tie named Bonnie the Bunny. While Fredbear was certainly his first love, Bonnie was extra special because that was his. It was an original character that he had created from scratch. And I do mean scratch. William's hand-sewn costumes were rough, with seams and stitches visibly showing. It's a handcrafted suit. You can see the seams and everything. It even has 5 fingers for the performer's hands. It is very much not a Springtrap suit. This is something much more rudimentary. It came at a time before animatronics were a part of the story. That's why I suspect that it was actually the first, predating literally everything. It's also a suit that is very personal to Afton. He put his digital consciousness in that form. It's his personal avatar. It's the way that he sees himself. There's also a whole separate discussion to be had here about the habits and rituals of serial killers. So the fact that he's choosing to lure kids and kill them in this particular suit actually says a lot about his emotional attachment to it. So while Fredbear seems to have started as someone else's creation, Golden Bonnie was uniquely Williams, giving him a personal connection. And that's not all. In this whole franchise, only one set of characters have themselves 5 fingers, the Nightmares. Even Golden Freddy, Fredbear was a 5-fingered wearable suit at one point in the story, as we see in this shot from the graphic novel, before he, like everyone else, was turned into an animatronic. This seems to imply that all of the main characters had similar wearable mascot outfits at least at one point in time, and that whoever is having the FNAF 4 nightmares, if they even are nightmares, saw those mascot suits specifically. Bonnie and Fredbear would perform on stage to small but enthusiastic crowds. Finally, he was able to deliver fantasy and fun to all the kids, delighting and inspiring them in the exact way that he had been delighted and inspired so many years ago. Afton, despite eventually falling to become the heartless serial killer and mad scientist that we know him as, began as someone with good intentions and a love of entertaining kids. He wanted to bring things to life from the very beginning, a theme that recurs a lot for him throughout the rest of the franchise. And things could have ended there. That could have been the end to his story. It could have been perfect had it not been for one thing. Other people saw the success of his idea and they wanted in. Enter Chica's Party World, a rival restaurant starring performing animal characters. His idea, except they did it better. William may have been the first, but obviously he wasn't the best. It hurt the prideful William Afton to admit it, but this restaurant was able to do the thing that he always wanted to do: make the animals actually come to life. All of the performers in this restaurant were robots, simple metal skeletons that were powered by battery packs, but all of them able to freely turn and talk and dance on their own, no human required. It was like magic. Magic that came from the mind of a brilliant creator named Henry Emily. This Henry, in some small way, had been able to harness the power of life itself. Afton admired him. He was jealous, to be sure, but he also looked upon this man with awe. Off to one side of Chica's party world was a small cabaret stage featuring an elephant magician. On the other, a hippo known to ramble on and on. That one was more of a joke for the parents. But it was the main stage that was for the kids. A rocking band of characters featuring a yellow chicken thing with a southern drawl named Chica, backed by a band of other country-themed characters, including a pig with a banjo, an upbeat frog from the local swimming hole, and a brown bear with a heavy southern accent. Wait, a bear? But bears were his animals. Why not a cow or a horse? Something to fit the country theme a bit better. Why did it have to be a bear? And adding insult to injury, they had the nerve to call this thing Ned Bear, a direct copy of his own Fred Bear.
Whoops, that's gonna leave a mark.
I've suspected that the mediocre melodies played a much more important role in the story than just being a bunch more animatronics to fill out the roster. Especially Ned Bear, which is just so suspiciously close to Fred Bear. And yet, there are two key details that we're gonna have to justify with any mediocre melodies mention. One, they're very rudimentary with external battery packs, implying that they come very early in the timeline. And two, we know that at minimum, Mr. Hippo does eventually become an official member of the extended Freddyverse. But if these things are supposed to be cheap, generic rip-offs, why would you be trying to rip off yourself? You wouldn't. You would be stealing someone else's ideas. So if Afton created Fredbear, there would have to be some rival franchise. The only other person who would likely be ripping him off? Henry. We've talked extensively about how the mediocre melodies are clearly Henry's design aesthetic, so it just has to be him. I don't think Henry's doing this maliciously. He doesn't strike me as the type. He was likely building the robots at the orders of someone else that was running a rival restaurant franchise. But that's enough motivation to start Afton down a path of jealous rivalry, but also begrudging admiration. As the Freddy Files Ultimate Edition says, it's important to revisit the beginning of Henry and William's relationship, so here you go. I think this is where it begins. Also, this is future Matt Pat here coming back to add this one in. Seems like the recently released character encyclopedia has backed up all of this speculation. I've had this timeline written for about a month now, but I've also been holding off a bit to see what wrenches this character encyclopedia might throw into it. And on this particular point, I gotta say, it seems like we might actually have nailed it. They actively call out the suspicious similarities to the main Fredbear crew. Quote from one of the pages: Ned Bear looks like an imitation, altered just enough to avoid copyright issues. I don't know about you, but that seems to imply that we were right on the money. Knowing all of this, at one point the franchises had to have merged. That's really the only way that you get Mr. Hippo from the rival franchise as part of the Fazbear crew. This also mirrors a lot of what happened in the real-life history of Chuck E. Cheese, with two rival restaurants, each with their own casts of characters, merging to become one unified brand. Again, we've gone into that in detail with other videos, just wanted to remind you all of that here. But why would I call out the rival restaurant as being named Chica's Party World? Few things, actually. First, we know for a fact that a location named Chica's Party World exists. It is mentioned in the source code teasing sister location, so it is out there somewhere and doesn't fit cleanly anywhere. Second, in the story The Puppet Carver, Chica is very explicitly looped in with the book versions of Pig Patch and Ned Bear, implying that she started as a mediocre melody. Thirdly, her design just fits better with the theme of down-home country animals with southern accents playing the banjo and eating with bibs. And with her being the headliner of the show with her name on the restaurant, it would make sense then that when the restaurants merged, she was the one that was added to the main cast of characters while all the other mediocres faded away. It's also why when Freddy's closes after William's killing spree, she's the one to branch back off into her old franchise and is therefore missing in sister location, a detail that's bothered me for years at this point. It might also explain why William decided to stuff his first dead kid into Chica. That one was Henry's creation, not his. Afton's jealous admiration turned to hardened bitterness, a bitterness that would only grow over the next couple of years as families continued to choose Chica's Party World over Fredbear's. William just couldn't compete with the appeal of the robots. Eventually, his restaurant would go bankrupt, only to get bailed out by, of course, Henry Emily. Another insult, another humiliation that William wouldn't soon forget. 1979. Despite being bitter, Afton couldn't deny that what came next was a period of massive success and expansion. With the two franchises now merged into one, it was the best of both worlds. Afton's ideas with Henry's robotic expertise. The two men decided to launch under a new name, Fredbear's Family Diner, a pizza chain that would eventually come to feature a mix of humans in performing suits, as well as on-stage animatronics. They decided to stick with Fredbear as the headliner, considering the yellow bear was easily identifiable as a brand because he was the original performing animal mascot. Afton appreciated that. This new restaurant would also see a mix of characters as the two franchises merged into one, with Pig Patch and Happy Frog performing right alongside Fredbear and Bonnie. And as part of this one big Fredbear family, they even got themselves official merch that were released, ranging from masks to magnets.
The crappy Mr. Hippo fridge magnet?
I'm sorry, Gregory.
That said, not all the characters were winners. The reception to some characters was just mediocre, so they faded away into the dumpster, storage units, and retro budget tech stores of lost nostalgia, waiting for their chance to step back into the limelight if and when a headliner went out of commission. Others, though, would fare much better, like a new Pirate Fox, as well as a blue guitar-playing variant of the yellow Bonnie Bunny. Ultimately, the franchise would get so big, it would spawn its own cartoon show, Fredbear and Friends. Business was booming. In the end, Fredbear and Bonnie's popularity would be so strong that they would be able to support the Fredbear's Family Diner franchise all on their own, while also spinning off a new sister location dedicated to their friends. In 1983, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza launched, giving a dedicated home to all this new supporting cast of characters. Chica the Chicken, Bonnie the Blue Bunny, Foxy the Pirate, and of course the headliner, a brown Freddy Fazbear. Business was good, and Afton was happy, mostly. It did bother him that the one original character that he created, the one that he himself played, Golden Bonnie, got passed over for inclusion in that cartoon show. The only character in the roster of regulars to get ignored for the show, but other than that, things were going smoothly. He had himself a wife, 2 sons, a daughter, he had a thriving business, and best of all, he was able to learn the craft of robotics from the man that he both loved and hated, Henry. Together, they were constantly pushing the limits of what these characters could do. Because it was quick and easy, new characters introduced into the roster would be given a simple hand-sewn suit with 5 fingers that any performer could wear. Eventually, Henry would design one of his signature animatronics for that character, utilizing a divided mouth with either a hinged or sliding jaw design. This was the first generation of animatronics. But why stop there? Afton had big ideas. What if the animatronics weren't just locked to the stage, but could freely roam the restaurant and interact with the kids? What if his mascot suits could become animatronics? What if you could use more than just rigid metallic skeletons? Why not experiment with tubes and wires that would give the animatronics fluidity and flexibility while still providing structure? The possibilities for this technology were endless. Afton fell in love with robotics. He had started with a dream of bringing one simple singing bear to life, but with robots, he had stumbled across the tools that gave him the ability to control life itself. And thanks to Henry, he was practically speedrunning his way to an engineering degree. And while William wouldn't admit it out loud, one other thing that kept pushing him forward was the desire to beat his former rival, to prove himself smarter and more capable, to surpass the man who everyone else considered to be a visionary genius. But pride cometh before the fall, and tragedy was about to strike. 1983, business was booming with 2 whole restaurant franchises running, Fredbear's Family Diner and the newly opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Together, William and Henry had been able to take the hybrid suit idea and make it into a reality. They called their new invention the Springlock suit, and fittingly enough, it was symbolic of the partnership between these 2 men, a human suit as designed by William that could become a freestanding Henry-style robot. But because it was still new tech with kinks to work out, the rollout was limited, restricted only to the Fredbear's Family Diner location. All of this meant that William was busier than ever. He didn't have time to be a full-time parent, so he designed a nanny cam system where cameras and speakers were hidden throughout the neighborhood, as well as in his youngest son's favorite toy, Psychic Friend Fredbear. I mean, plushy Fredbear. But since cameras just weren't enough to raise a kid, he also left childcare duties to his eldest son, Michael. There was just one problem with that. Michael was far from the best babysitter. He tormented his younger brother by jump-scaring him with a Foxy mask and constantly left him behind. William watched all of it from his cameras. Kids would be kids. Tomorrow was another day, after all. Except Michael's torment didn't stop. Bitter, angry thoughts would run through Michael's mind. Why did he have to be the one to take care of this whining crybaby all the time? It just wasn't fair. It was time that he got even with his brother by playing the ultimate prank. A prank that just so happened to be on this crying child's birthday. He and his friends would take his scared little brother and make him do the one thing that he was terrified of doing, getting close to the animatronics. That would be embarrassing for the kid that was such an embarrassment meant to him. His brother squirmed, screamed, kicked, and fought, but just as they were putting that small, squirming boy up to Fredbear's lips, the mouth snapped shut. The sensitive spring locks inside the body had been triggered by the boy's movements, and they'd immediately clamped down. The wriggling stopped. The boy went limp, but it was just a prank. It was meant to be funny. The boy was taken to the hospital and was immediately given an IV. Flowers and pills filled the nightstand next to his hospital bed, but the damage was too severe. He couldn't recover. As the younger brother's consciousness began to fade, he could hear Michael's last words, a small and flimsy apology. But his father, Williams, through the voice of the Fredbear plush, were a firm and committed promise to a dying son. You're broken. I will put you back together. This would not be the end. No matter what, Williams' son would live again. It would just take time. Time that, right now, he just didn't have. His young son's heart flatlined as the boy faded into the inky unknown of the afterlife. In the aftermath of the tragedy, changes started happening around the restaurants. Kids were now required to wear security wristbands to prevent anyone from getting outside without parental permission. Any kid who approached the exit without permission would have to answer to the security puppet, a marionette on strings that could fly around on rails across the restaurant to stop kids in their tracks. It was Williams' idea, inspired by Michael constantly leaving the restaurant without his brother. In the wake of Fredbear's spring lock failure, all the hybrid suits were getting retired, locked away at the nearby Freddy Fazbear location. It was yet another tough pill to swallow after all the hard work that he and Henry had put into them. William would eventually bury the boy's small body in a remote location out in the woods right alongside his drive into and out of work every day. The death of this little boy sent the family spiraling. His wife, crippled with grief, was so distraught that all she could do was sit and watch TV. But his son Michael was far worse, complaining of seeing hallucinations of a golden bear standing outside of his window. The boy was so racked with guilt that he was convinced that he was being haunted by the ghost of his brother stuck inside the suit that took his life. The suit's three-toed feet digging into the wet earth. The words, "It's me," ringing through Michael's ears. Some nights, Michael would even go so far as to break out of his room to check the gravesite and ensure that his brother was still there. As for William himself, he disappeared into his work and his drinks. Junior's, the local bar, wasn't far from his son's gravesite. He found himself going there more and more frequently, spending longer and longer amounts of time there. The bar gave him a place to think, to remember, to reflect and stew on how Henry had stolen his idea for an animal-themed restaurant. How they'd cut his character out of the cartoon when everyone else was there. How Henry had humiliated him by buying him out of bankruptcy. And now there was his son. Henry had taken his son from him. The robotic part was the part that failed, after all. William ordered one more drink, but it was one too many. The bar turned him out and told him to go home. But William didn't go home. Drunk and angry, William raced back to the restaurant to give Henry a piece of his mind, only to find someone else waiting. Henry's daughter, Charlie, locked outside of the building, bullies laughing at her through the window. Fine, some other problem to fix. But then Afton got an idea, a beautifully awful idea. This was his chance to get back at the man that had humiliated him all those years ago. Henry had killed his business, and now Henry's robotic suit had killed his son. It was time for William to do some killing of his own. Let Henry feel what it's like to have something you love get ripped away. While parties continued inside the walls of the pizzeria, William attacked Charlie in the back alley. And it felt good. He felt free. The years of resentment and bitterness trapped in his heart finally released in a moment of pure unapologetic evil. He would make Henry hurt like he hurts. And in that moment, William became a killer. He dropped Charlie's lifeless body and drove home, forced to confront his family problems later that night, appalled, but also a little excited by what he had just done. Charlie's death would remain on the books as a random act of violence. And though Henry had suspicions about William, there was no physical evidence, nothing that could link him back to the crime. In the weeks that followed, Fredbear's family diner would close for good. 2 high-profile deaths around the restaurant with 2 grieving owners in such a short period of time was just too much bad press to handle. Besides, Freddy Fazbear's was still open, and it was the newer restaurant anyway. All the equipment from the diner, including the old yellow suits and security puppet, would get retired to that location, and there they would sit for 2 uneventful years. The rest of 1983 and 1984 were spent quietly grieving. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the new cast of characters were a hit. Tragic memories of their yellow predecessors quickly faded. Afton kept a low profile and buried himself in work and research, quickly reaching Henry's level of engineering and even surpassing him. And while Henry slowed down to grieve, Afton kept going, even starting his own company, Afton Robotics, for all those pet projects that were a little bit too experimental for the regular operations of the pizzeria. The first of these experimental projects was a secret workshop under his house, a veritable bunker, which allowed him to work while still monitoring his kids via hidden security cameras. 198 3. A passcode that served as a constant reminder of why the cameras were so important, why he was down there in the first place. This was all to fulfill the promise that he had made to his son, right? I will put you back together. This was for him. All for him. Right? But cameras weren't enough. He needed to solve the runaway Michael problem. He had to keep him in the house. He couldn't have another one of his kids wind up dead inside of an animatronic suit. So why not run a little experiment on Michael? You see, all this work with Henry had gotten Afton to start learning more about life, robots, the human mind, and what a fallible machine we as humans were. Our reality is so easy to manipulate with a few sensory deceptions. Deceptions like sound. With just a few sounds, he had discovered that he could alter a person's vision. He could transform blank, smooth plastic robots into lumbering, twisted nightmares. Nightmares far scarier than he could create with actual materials. They would appear organic, rotting, putrid, terrifying. These would be his means of keeping his son Michael in the house where he belonged. Was it extreme? Maybe. But then again, this was the boy who had killed his son. He would make him sorry. And so Michael would grow up not only dealing with the memories of his own guilt, the hospital room, the pills, the flowers, the death of his brother, but also facing literal nightmares, illusions created by sound. Michael would never forget these either. Years later, as a security guard, he would still draw pictures of them inside of his logbook. But all of these extra projects meant that his home life suffered even more. He was an absent father and a non-existent husband, leaving his wife cold and alone.
Why do you hide inside your walls when there is music in my halls? All I see is an empty room, no more joy, an empty tomb.
And despite her repeated demands that he leave his office and engage with the family, he refused time and time again, leaving her no choice but to leave.
You burned down my house?
You call that a house? It was like a morgue in there. You need to see your son!
The baby isn't mine.
Well, how's this? I'm keeping the diamond ring.
And through it all, there was one lingering feeling. William wasn't done. He had gotten a taste of what it felt like to be unleashed, what it felt like to be free. Charlie's murder had unlocked something in him, and he wanted more. June 26th, 1985. Putting on the golden Bonnie suit, he lured children one by one to the back room of the pizzeria when no one was looking. At first, he was cautious. He would lure them with promises of cake and cookies. He told them that their dog had died. He would ask for help with homework. Susie was the first. You never truly forget your first.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
But where to hide the bodies? He couldn't sneak out. Someone would see him. He had to hide them in a place where they'd never be found and where they'd never leave the building. They had to be stuffed inside of the suits.
He had to be big
no one
enough,
maintained
too.
those things anyway, except for him. And so Susie would go into Chica. Fritz, Jeremy, and Gabriel would come next, but it was easy. It was too easy. And with each little life he snuffed out, his lies got bigger. Their house was burning. They're just being kidnapped. Until the last one where all pretense was off. He let himself get violent. Too violent.
I'll just wait for him after school, throw a bag over his head, hit him with a shovel, and drag him into the back of my car.
The body of Cassidy was far more bloody and broken than any of the others. He'd let himself go too far. That one he shouldn't have killed. With no more active animatronics left, he shoved the body into the one suit that remained backstage. The long-forgotten yellow Fredbear, now broken and discolored with age. Broken, like Cassidy was broken, like his son was broken. Newspapers reported on this disappearance, naming the whole thing the missing children's incident. Police would even charge William with the crimes after finding security footage of the golden mascot suit luring kids to the back, but they couldn't convict him. They had no bodies, and his face had been hidden behind the mascot suit the entire time. What they had was circumstantial at best, and so he walked away a free man. But Henry knew the truth. In these murders, he saw his daughter Charlie all over again, so he threw Afton out of the company and shuttered the doors to the old pizzeria. Henry would keep the franchise quiet for 2 years. This would not happen again. This could not happen again. How could he protect the kids? Finally, he developed a solution. He would implement an even more extreme security system in the form of new animatronics. Toy animatronics, inspired by the toys that they had been selling years ago. But these guys, these were special. They were a new breed of robot with facial recognition abilities.
But most importantly, they're all tied into some kind of criminal database so they can detect a predator a mile away.
All the original animatronics, now withered with age, were moved to the new location. With a plan in place, it was time to try once more. The year was 1987, and the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was making headlines in local newspapers. Headlines that just so happened to catch the attention of William Afton. Freddy's was back, and without him, that was his idea, his character. Henry was, yet again, trying trying to cut him out of the picture. No. As long as these restaurants stayed open, William would always come back. Then he noticed the phone number to apply at the bottom of the article. $100 a week. To apply, call. Afton would go back, not as an owner or co-founder. He would go back in the one place that they would least suspect him, a lowly day shift security guard. And there it was, buried in the back of parts and services mixed in with the old withered animatronics was the golden rabbit. With the yellow security badge still on his chest, he used his crank to pull open the spring locks. It was time for Bonnie to give an encore performance.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. A position just became available.
1987, 5 more kids. He didn't know what felt better, getting back into the suit after 2 long years of waiting, or knowing how devastating this would be to Henry the next morning. He didn't even try to hide his crime this time, just meant more blood on Henry's hands. He'd failed to protect the kids again. The restaurant had only been open for a few weeks, but William was sure that this would get it to close. Good, if he couldn't have Freddy's, no one would. Whenever a new pizzeria opened, he would be there. But as he sat in his bunker, something else started to linger in William's mind. He had seen something strange. The old withered animatronics, they had been wandering around the building, spurred on by the puppet. It was almost like those old robots were trying to save the kids. Save them? They couldn't, obviously, but still, how were they moving? It was almost like they had been given life somehow. Did he have something to do with that? The following day, the news would report a security guard getting bitten by one of the animatronics during the day shift. Was that bite meant for him? William's curiosity was stronger now than his bloodlust. He had to learn more, but how? There was no way he'd ever be able to get inside another Freddy's pizzeria. Heck, there was practically no way a Freddy's would ever open again. He needed to create something new, something brand new. He needed to create his own pizzeria.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
Circus Baby's Pizza World. This would be the place where he could continue his work. No longer just murdering, experimenting. He needed more kids, and he needed them alive. And knowing that he couldn't show his face on the restaurant floor, he needed a way of remotely capturing his victims and preserving them for his work. With that goal in mind, he designed a new breed of animatronic. Their endoskeletons fluid and flexible. He equipped them with sound lures that could mimic voices. They could isolate children. They could incapacitate and contain them with zero direct input from him. It was brilliant. He was brilliant. Far beyond the simple bars and wires of Henry's designs. And the characters he chose for this were uniquely his. His new roster wasn't going to be tainted by Henry's disgusting barnyard bird. Instead, it was back to his characters, his creations, Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, as well as 2 special ones. The first, Ballora, was an homage to the woman who left him. Now she would never leave him again. The second, the titular baby, was designed with his baby in mind, Elizabeth, his youngest child. She would always be Daddy's little girl, the one that listened to him, the one that obeyed, until the day that she didn't.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her? She's so pretty and shiny. Didn't you make her just for me?
The day before Circus Baby's Pizza World opened, she disobeyed. She didn't listen. Left alone with Baby, she got too close. The animatronic ripped in half and swallowed her whole. A scared and confused child fading into eternal darkness. By the time Afton found her, it was too late. She was gone. He immediately canceled the launch of Circus Babies under the guise of a gas leak. But wait, as he sat there at the foot of the stage, he noticed that something was different. The eye color of the robot had changed. Baby had been built with blue eyes, but now they were emerald green, the same color as Elizabeth's. Was she in there? Could this all be connected to the free-moving animatronics that he had seen at Freddy's? He had to know more. His mourning turned to excitement. He had to return to where it all started. 1993. Pathetic. This place was pathetic. Henry had clearly tried to reopen one final time with those old original animatronics from so long ago, but William's damage to the brand had been permanent. These things stank of death. They hadn't been washed in decades. But even if they had, nothing could wash away the stink of murder that haunted these halls. One night, then another, then another. William William repeatedly snuck into the old broken restaurant to lure the living animatronics to him, one by one dismantling them, robbing them of their endoskeletons. The metal had to be the secret. It had to contain the remnants of life itself, but he had to know for sure. Leaping out of a room that was invisible to the animatronics programming, he dragged the oversized robotic skeletons back to his underground workshop, back to where Circus Baby watched on with glowing, curious eyes. Eyes that somehow felt alive. Not knowing what else to do, William melted the robotic parts down. 5 animatronic endoskeletons reduced down to one silvery puddle of goo. Could he transfer this living metal to his own creations? He had to try. He picked up a syringe and filled it with the molten metal and injected the goo into Funtime Freddy's twisted, wiry endoskeleton. And suddenly the coils came to life. Like snakes writhing in a pile, what had once been cold, lifeless metal moved and jolted on its own. He'd done it! He had unlocked the secret to life itself. Except something was clearly wrong. The movements were erratic. They were violent, angry. Baby didn't act this way. She had been calm, collected. This was clearly something else, something mindless and frantic. Perhaps by mixing the souls and then portioning them out, he had created incomplete beasts. He would need to keep testing to truly understand it. He needed more of this remnant. As he searched the old pizzeria one more time for any remaining scraps of metal, the ghosts attacked. His past victims come to collect their due, all led by Cassidy. The 5 lined up and blocked the door, and Afton's mind reeled. The scientific implications of this were incredible. Ghosts, real ghosts that he could see, all standing against him. But what could they do? What couldn't they do? He panicked as Cassidy approached. How do you stop something that's already dead? Maybe with the thing that resulted in their death in the first place. He would get into his suit like old times. He would regain his power over them just like the day that they died. He was the genius. He was the one in the suit. He was the one in charge! The spring lock snapped into place. Maybe it was his frantic movements. Maybe it was the leaky abandoned restaurant. Maybe it was just fate coming to collect its due. He didn't know. The only thing he did know was that his brain was suddenly filled with searing white-hot pain. As hundreds of metallic pins and gears stabbed into his body from all sides. All he could do was collapse, blood slowly oozing out of the suit and pooling onto the floor around him. It couldn't end like this. It wouldn't end like this. His work was unfinished. Unable to move, his only option was to survive, to live, to keep living. It took days lying in his own blood, but eventually someone found him. A security guard making a normal report. When he saw the animatronics torn apart in the middle of the party room floor, it caused him to file an immediate report of a break-in. An owner would have to come in and claim the damage. And who else would it be other than Henry? Hope jumped in Afton's heart. Henry would see him. They were partners after all. He would be the one to help save him, to get him out of this suit, to relieve him from this tremendous pain. Henry entered the secret room. His eyes fell on Afton sitting there in the pool of red, and Henry, saying nothing, turned and walked away.
This is just to inform all employees that due to budget restrictions, the previously mentioned safe rooms are being sealed at most locations, including this one. Nothing is being taken out beforehand, so if you left anything inside, then it's your own fault. Management also requests that this room not be mentioned to family, friends, or insurance representatives.
And so there Afton would sit, hanging on for 30 years, trapped behind the walls with an iron will that refused to die. Most of this is things that we already knew, stuff that's been established and re-established time and time again by the games. That said, there are 2 things that I absolutely have to address. The first and biggest is the placement of Sister Location, or more specifically, Elizabeth's death. To me, evidence in game seems to suggest that it was meant to come before the crying child's death in 1983. The biggest clue to this is that the crying child saw something. Remember what you saw is the phrase that's repeated over and over again by psychic friend Fredbear, aka William Afton speaking through a walkie-talkie in the Fredbear plushie's stomach. But what did he see? Well, I think we can tell based on how the nightmare animatronics are visualized. They have mouths in their stomachs, just like Baby ripping in half at the waist to swallow a kid. There's also the empty girl's room, one presumably left behind by a dead sister. And lastly, it explains why he's scared, and more specifically why Afton wants him scared. He needs his kids to stay away from the animatronics. He doesn't want them getting too close because the last time one of his kids got too close to a robot, his daughter died. That's then why he sets up the nightmares, to scare both Mike and the crying child away from the animatronics from that point forward. That's why books like the Character Encyclopedia outright suggest that we play as the crying child in FNAF 4. That's why he has a nanny cam following the crying child everywhere, so he can keep tabs on his kids when they're out of his sight. He can't let another Elizabeth this situation happen. The death of Elizabeth also gives William Afton extra motivation for killing. He's a grieving father. His daughter was taken away from him, so Charlie should die as well. He's lashing out at the world after losing his kids. And again, we know that at least one of his children had to have died prior to Charlie's death, based on the mound of dirt that we see in Midnight Motorist. It also allows Circus Babies to open and close earlier in the timeline, which is how you wind up with Funtime Foxy appearing as Mangle in the FNAF 2 location. Basically, Elizabeth dying first has everything it needs to fit, except for the most important thing, the murder weapon. Why would Afton be building an animatronic with a giant claw in its stomach so early in the timeline? At this point, he just has no motive. It just doesn't make sense prior to 1983. At this point in the story, he hasn't killed anyone, and we know for a fact that the missing children's incident is 1985. So Elizabeth's death coming before any of those events just doesn't work, hence why I placed it where I did in the narrative timeline. Afton's death here is also a bit tricky. We know that he returned to the FNAF 1 location to break down the original animatronics in order to harvest their remnant. We know that he melts down 5 things to become one thing. Candy Cadet makes that very clear. So the 5 things are the 5 endoskeletons from the various animatronics. That would be totally fine if it weren't for one huge problem. On his 5th visit to the pizzeria, Afton gets spring locked. So either the 5 becoming 1 starts in 1993, but then finishes 30 years later when he re-emerges from the wall to add the last endoskeleton to his pile, or he's had himself some reason to return to the original location after harvesting all the stuff that he can. It's not ideal, but it's the one angle that makes the most sense. William still wasn't back. Weird. Michael knew his father sometimes traveled for work, disappearing for days on end, but usually there was some sort of notice, a phone call, a post-it, something. It's not like Michael and his father were close, far from it, but as a household of 2 suffering men coping with years of tragedy and loss, there was at least some element of communication between the two of them. They were united by a name and a shared pain. This time though, things felt different. William had left nothing. His absence was longer. There were no check-ins, no updates, just silence. Something had happened. If there was one thing Michael knew about his father, it was that he had contingencies, safety checks, backup plans. His father was a careful and guarded man. He held his cards close to his chest, and as such, William had prepared him in the event that something like this ever happened. Normally, his father kept his home office locked, but in the event of an unexpected, prolonged absence, Michael had been instructed to enter his father's office and look behind an empty set of shelves mounted in the corner of the room. Rolling his eyes, Michael entered the office. He never fully understood how William was able to spend so many hours of his days locked up in here. There was just nothing to do. Most of this place was empty. He dragged himself over to the shelf in the corner, expecting to find an emergency contact list, a family safety deposit box. But what he actually found there was completely unexpected.
Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be.
The shelf swung open and revealed a giant industrial elevator, one that led straight down into an underground bunker. But that was impossible. Hidden inside his childhood home was a secret entrance to an enormous underground science lair? It didn't make any sense. Seriously, it didn't make any sense. And yet, here it was, mapped directly underneath the floor plan of the house that he'd grown up in, lost his brother in, been tortured in. Michael thought that he'd known his father, a prideful, sad, angry man with petty everyday problems, but clearly he'd been living with a stranger this entire time. His father had secrets. Suddenly, the days of William being locked inside of his office made sense. He'd been here the entire time. Where was here, though? Was this Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals? The Circus Baby restaurant always did seem to be a deeply personal project for father. A failure of his that cut unusually deep, especially after that first location had to be closed prematurely due to the gas leaks. After that day, father really did seem to change.
That's why it burned down.
Himself even more in his work. Clearly the entrance he had found was some sort of secret back way into the facility, one that required crawling through vents to navigate. His father had been working here, but in secret. Why? And that's when he found her. At the end of the facility, Circus Baby, his father's pride and joy. Except something was different about her. She wasn't like the others. The way she talked, the stories she told. This wasn't just a robot. She was alive, somehow. And not only was she alive, she also felt familiar.
There is something bad inside of me. I'm broken. I can't be fixed. Will you help me?
Was this his sister? William's baby girl? But how? Why? What was this place? He dug around some old files and found blueprints outlining the features of these animatronics. Storage containers, voice mimicking, parental tracking. And was that a child in Freddy's stomach? Was his father collecting and experimenting experimenting on kids? Were all the rumors that he'd heard throughout his past actually true? That the animatronics came to life at night? That there were murders done in all the pizzerias? That his father had somehow been the prime suspect in all of it? Suddenly, Michael's mind flashed back to his persistent nightmares throughout his childhood. Had he been experimented on too? Tears stung in his eyes as anger, fear, and confusion filled his body. His father's secrets were pouring out. William wasn't just a lame, overworked father. He was a monster, toying with life itself. Suddenly, everything clicked. He frantically looked around the room, blinking human heads on poles staring back at him. Green eyes, his sister. Blue eyes, his brother. Closed eyes, his mom. All just staring, expectantly. These were meant to be human. William was working down here trying to make believable humans, literally rebuilding the family that they had both lost. The small little girl robots with their British accents roaming the hallways of this underground facility suddenly took on a whole new context.
Hello in there. Is this the same person?
Were those meant to be his sister? A replacement for her? A clone? Was William building clones of his sister? They seemed to know him, after all, to react to his presence.
They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
He always did have a bit of a resemblance to his father. Michael's mind reeled as the reality of his world crumbled to dust. No, he had to get them out of there. If this really was his sister, heck, if any of these things were human, souls, whatever remnant of the humans that they once were, they needed to be rescued.
They always put us back inside. There's nowhere for us to hide here.
Led by the voice of Circus Baby, he marched through the now empty halls of the Funtime Auditorium. He would lead them. He would protect them. And finally, he would be able to forgive himself for the killing of his brother so many years.
This is your garbage trash browser, and this is Opera GX. you see this difference?
You are in the scooping room now. The scooper only hurts for a moment.
Scooper? That violent extraction arm? Michael had seen that one in the pile of blueprints. Something about heat rendering the magical silver metal inside useless. In reality, prior to getting himself spring-locked and put behind the wall, William's methods had become increasingly sophisticated, with a mechanized arm that could infuse new bodies with a soul. William could finally give and take away life. The only thing he needed were the bodies. But William wasn't the only one looking for bodies, as Michael was about to learn.
But if we looked like you, then we could hide. If we looked like you, then we would have somewhere to go.
Michael was going to be the hero to help these animatronics, all right. He was going to help the haunted tubes and wires of these animatronics escape, just not the way that he anticipated. His sister had lied to him, another game of pretend. The scooper plowed forward, digging its extraction arm into his body. As he heard his bones ripping through his flesh, Michael blacked out.
But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not.
For the next several months, Michael's life was not his own. He was forced to comply with a tangle of wires and spirits that lived inside of him. His body felt like an overfilled balloon begging to burst as day by day, week by week, his flesh began to sag and discolor. He was a walking, talking, rotting corpse, alive, but wishing he wasn't. He was a puppet, a walking shell. And while he did his best to conceal his fate, there was only so much a man filled with robot spaghetti could do. The entity in his innards would eventually leave, but by that point, the damage had been done. His decaying flesh stank, turning him into a literal purple guy. But still, even with no bones, even with rotting purple flesh and begging to die, Michael continued to live. That silvery metal remnant injected by the scooper meant that he couldn't die. His anger also refused to die. What he had seen down there in his sister's location had rocked him to his core. His father had killed and captured dozens. His experiments had killed his sister and then tortured him throughout all his childhood. He was actively trying to build human replicants. He didn't know where his father was, but Michael knew that he was out there somewhere.
I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you.
Michael had to correct for the sins of his father. He had to make things right. Michael would burn Fazbear Entertainment to the ground. I mean, what else could you do when your skin was permanently purple? Michael's strategy was simple. He would apply for night security guard positions at the old defunct pizzeria locations. That way, no one ever had to see him or smell him during his shift. And all these old shuttered locations did need guards. Teenage vandals and squatters were always looking to get inside these abandoned buildings, and yet no one ever really wanted to work an overnight graveyard shift unless they were practically out of options. Enter Mike. One by one, he would take on the job of security guard, changing his name each time.
Who do you play as in Five Nights at Freddy's 3?
According to Wikipedia, the player assumes the role of an unnamed security guard at Fazbear's Fright, a horror-themed attraction based on Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a family restaurant.
Henry Emily? That's the one, Jeremy Fitzgerald. I don't know. I don't know.
Time to ensure that no one was able to follow his paper trail. Once inside, he could tamper with the animatronics and figure out how they worked, writing about his experiences in his security logbook. While there, he would listen to the old tapes where upper management awkwardly welcomed new recruits to their summer jobs, even though he was working there nowhere near the summer months. He heard the gory details of his father's franchise from the outsiders looking in, confused and afraid about what was happening in the walls around them. Sometimes he would see his brother in the form of the Golden Freddy suit. It's me appearing on the walls around him. Except now, there was something else there. He was no longer alone. Another angrier presence was also in the suit, as if two spirits were forced to share the same body. And Golden Freddy would attack him now. It was aggressive. Its vengeance wanted to lash out at anyone with the Afton name, anyone who wore a security guard outfit. Over time, Mike worked his way through the old restaurants, the original pizzeria, the bigger, better Freddy Fazbear's. He spent weeks there looking for clues as to his father's whereabouts, and each time at the end of his week shift, he would then set the location on fire. Remnant can't survive high temperatures after all. So burning away whatever spirit-laden animatronics that still existed inside seemed like a winning strategy. All this revisiting of his past, though, was causing the nightmares to begin again. Hallucinations that brought him back to his childhood. The guilt around killing his brother. His dreams were oddly mixed with the shrill phone calls of the security guards. But it would all be worth it in the end. The goal was to eventually stumble across the one location, the one job that would finally reunite him with his father.
Ooh-wee. I'm back. Ooh.
Father. Little did Mike know that that day would come sooner than he expected. 2023, an advertisement came across Mike's TV. Fazbear Frights, a new horror attraction inspired by the awful crimes that occurred around Freddy Fazbear's Pizza so many years ago. It made Mike sick. People looking to make a quick buck off the tragedy of others, off his own family. This wasn't a joke or entertainment. Regardless, he had to be a part of it. If this team was combing through his family's history, they might stumble across something that could be useful.
That doesn't make sense because the movie, the movie's so much different.
And if his father was truly still alive as he suspected, there would be no way that he wouldn't show up here.
This
Maybe
made after the movie.
Finally, this could be the final chapter in his family's marathon of tragedy. Mike applied for the job and was immediately handed the keys. Years of doing this had taught him that security guards rarely receive thorough security checks. They also liked how creepy Mike looked. They thought it was a costume, on theme for the job. What little they knew.
Hey, glad you came back for another night. I promise it'll be a lot more interesting this time.
For weeks, there was nothing. But just as Mike considered giving up, he received the call that he'd been waiting for years.
You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
Could this finally be him? Sure enough, there he was. William inside his iconic golden Bonnie Springlock suit, only now it was green and decaying with age. And there they were, a small family of broken men finally reunited. It's been a long time, Dad. Mike had always struggled with the phantoms of his past haunting him, but now all the animatronics he'd encountered over the past months, hopping from pizzeria to pizzeria, suddenly sprang to life, their burned faces haunting him as he tried to keep track of his father on the cameras. It would seem that William's mere presence had put the spirits on high alert. Ultimately, they were harmless, more annoying than anything else, but there was one that felt different from the others. One that was more than just a mere phantom. The security puppet. If he looked at the cameras at just the right moment, he could see it floating there through the halls. He could even see its reflection in the water pooled on the ground. It would seem like he wasn't the only one there on a mission. While he was dealing with Springtrap, Michael assumed that this one was likely dealing with the spirits of this place, finally setting them to rest. Hopefully this means a happier day for all of us, Mike thought to himself. And in that moment, he felt the air around him release, like pressure being let out of a bottle. The building sighed, as if 5 spirits had finally been allowed to move on. He had the sense that his brother was a part of them. He rigged the wiring inside the building to misfire, and the dry, desiccated walls erupted in flames. It is finished.
Listen, paying $14.99 a month for a streaming app and $9.99 a month for a music app.
Except, it was not. Somehow, through sheer force of will, Afton remained. He had survived, and Mike would need to find a new way of finishing off his father. Luckily, the solution would present itself later that year. Not from Mike, but from another victim that had been left in his father's wake.
You're talking about becoming a Fazbear Entertainment franchisee. Restaurant ownership and management. Something almost anyone can do with a limited degree of success. You are now the face of the newly rebranded Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Fazbear Entertainment as a brand has been closed for years. William had been stuck in a suit and a wall. The only person who legally could bring the franchise back was Henry, but he'd largely pulled out of the franchise around the time of his father's disappearance. Something was up. Surely this had to be some kind of a trick, right? Mike, doing what he did best, applied for a franchise and immediately got the job. There was just one thing out of the ordinary. Paragraph 4.
If you are playing this tape, that means that not only have you been checking outside at the end of every shift, as you were instructed to do, but also that you have found something that meets the criteria of your special obligations under paragraph 4.
No employment contract he'd ever signed required him to keep special lookout for independently moving animatronics outside the restaurant. Now he knew something was up here. Henry was luring them all back. Rather than trying to go to them, like Mike had done for years, Henry was doing the opposite. He was putting them all under the same roof. He was finishing them off for good. Mike knew this wasn't meant to be a restaurant. It was meant to be a prison, a containment vessel, a locked box meant to trap them all in so they could finally end the madness. It took a few nights, but eventually everyone was there. His father, the puppet, the robot spaghetti that had once violated his body, and his sister, now hopelessly devoted to serve the man that had once gotten her killed. It was time. He had been instructed to seal the doors and leave, but while he locked everything down, he didn't move on. If this was truly meant to be the end, if the remnant needed to be washed away, he needed to be a part of that.
This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you, although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace and perhaps more waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, friend.
And with that, it was over. The Afton legacy died with all of them trapped inside of a literal box. As the flames danced around the office, Mike, for the first time in decades, was happy. But William wasn't gone yet. Although the darkest pit of hell was open and waiting for him, something or someone wouldn't allow him to move on. Instead, he found himself locked in moments from his past. The pizzeria, his son's room, his underground bunker. It was as if his brain's neurons were all firing at once, overloaded, mixing and matching all his biggest fears, regrets, failures. What was this place? How did he get here? He called out into the silence. Then they started coming. Without warning, animatronics, both new and old, began to jump out at him, bite him, rip him limb from limb. The pain was immeasurable. Make it stop! Make it stop! William, for the first time, longed for death, an end to this torture. Just as it felt like he couldn't take it anymore, everything was quiet again. It was as if the world had been reset. There was a brief moment of quiet, and then the onslaught began again.
What happened?
William wasn't. Flames danced around the office. Mike, for the first time in decades, was happy. But William wasn't wasn't gone yet. Although the darkest pit of hell was open and waiting for him, something or someone wouldn't allow him to move on. Instead, he found himself locked in moments from his past. The pizzeria, his son's room, his underground bunker. It was as if his brain's neurons were all firing at once, overloaded, mixing and matching all his biggest fears, regrets, failures. What was this place? How did he get here? He called out into the silence. Then they started coming. Without warning, animatronics, both new and old, began to jump out at him, bite him, rip him limb from limb. The pain was immeasurable. Make it stop! Make it stop! William, for the first time, longed for death, an end to this torture, just as it felt like he couldn't take it anymore. Everything was quiet again. It was as if the world had been reset. There was a brief moment of quiet, and then the onslaught began again. Dozens of faces from his past all focused on him. A waking nightmare that he couldn't escape from. More pain, more ripping. It was his own personal hell, but why? Why couldn't he just die? And then he saw them, a group of characters he never thought he'd see again. Those janky, stolen characters that had started everything. The mediocre melodies. It had all started to go wrong once they showed up. Once Henry had made them. But mixed in with their obnoxious southern drawls, William heard something else. It was barely a whisper, but he could just make out the words.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
That voice. He knew that voice, but from where?
Greetings from the fire, and from the one you should not have killed.
The one he shouldn't have killed. William thought back. He'd done a lot of awful things, but there was always the one that stood out. Not Charlie, his drunken act of revenge. Not Susie, his first true murder, no. Instead, it was the one that he had lost control with. The one that he had broken beyond repair for no good reason other than because he could. The one that he'd
Oh, Susie's Chica.
stuffed inside the golden bear that his partner used to wear, Cassidy. They were back, and now they were trying to punish him, to make him suffer like he'd made them suffer. It was almost like William and Cassidy's souls had been locked together, fused by a collective rage and spite, each refusing to move on. But while Cassidy was so focused on taking revenge, they actually did the one thing that would be the downfall for so many others. They kept William alive. Even though fire should have destroyed the remnant that was coursing through his being, Cassidy kept William breathing, paving the way for his escape. William's will was so strong, his soul so powerful that he managed to put a part of himself inside the circuitry that housed the spring-locked suit. And there, his consciousness lay, inside a single circuit board, waiting for someone to find him and set him free. A person that no one would suspect. You might have noticed that I was vague about the dates, and there's good reason for that. I don't know them. There is no good way for me to make them fit in. Here's what I do know. We know with a high amount of certainty that Michael Afton is the character that we play as up until Ultimate Custom Night. Mike Schmidt and Fritz Smith, the security guards for FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 respectively, get fired for, quote, tampering with the animatronics and odor. So weird connection between the two of them, right? But now, look at the phantom animatronics that are haunting us in FNAF 3. They use models from both FNAF 1 and FNAF 2, meaning whoever is sitting in that security guard chair, Fazbear Fright, they have to have seen both.
You're not Michael Afton in part 1. Who do you play as in FNAF 1?
Mike Schmidt. According
Yeah,
to
Mike
Wikipedia-
Schmidt. Mike Schmidt, FNAF.
According to Five Nights at Freddy's Wiki, fandom, Mike Schmidt is the main character of Five Nights.
I don't know what's going on.
Locations and their animatronics. And that's not all. Their designs are burnt. It's a weird detail in the game, and it's something that the character encyclopedia repeatedly calls attention to. The burned texture for these phantom animatronics. Why is that so unusual though? Fazbear Frights is the first time in the franchise that we hear about anything burning down. From that point on in the story, it's like the characters turn pyro and are suddenly setting fires left and right. But for the first 3 games, nothing ever catches fire. The animatronics are just moved or repurposed in some way. So when did they burn? And why would our security guards see them as being burned? Someone has to have been going location to location, setting these places on fire, purging the sins of the past. We know we're definitely playing as Mike and Sister Location in FNAF 6 based on the in-game dialogue. And in FNAF 4, there's an Easter egg where we can hear the phone call from Night 1 of FNAF 1, meaning that whoever's in that bedroom has heard the recording as a security guard. We also know that Mike has seen the nightmare animatronics based on his drawings in the security logbook. So overall, there is solid evidence that connects all of FNAFs 1 through 6. You'll also notice how the character encyclopedia doesn't have a page for Mike Afton. This thing has a page for Chocolate Bunny Bonnie, but not Michael? Some tells me they don't want us to confirm how many games he's been in, because that would confirm too much of the theory. In short, this gives us an incredibly compelling and complete narrative. Mike as our protagonist, and William, his father, as our antagonist. Mike accidentally kills his brother in Fredbear's mouth, which begins our story and sets William down his pathway of destruction. Mike is then haunted by the guilt of his past and is looking to make things right across the rest of the games. In Sister Location, he learns what his father's been up to and realizes what he has to do to correct it. After failing to finish the job in FNAF 3, he ultimately helps Henry end it all in FNAF 6. It is great. It is a clean narrative. There is just one problem: timing. Mike's quest can't really start until he's been down to Sister Location, seen Baby, and gotten himself scooped. That's when he finds out about Afton's secret life. It's also when he's gonna start to smell, because, you know, he's a walking, talking, rotting corpse. And we know that he's not going down into the bunker until the Funtime animatronics have been made, Freddy's has been closed, and Afton is out of the picture. That all should be happening post-1993, after William is sealed behind a wall. But that then presents us with a few problems. Afton has already dismantled the original animatronics as we see in the FNAF 3 minigames. How are those things getting burned if they're already deconstructed? But more importantly, we see FNAF 2 paychecks with the date 1987. That is way earlier than I think it can be. To be fair, Fritz Smith's pink slip on night 7 doesn't have a date, but it's a bit weird to say that the first few nights are in 1987 and then employee number 3 is hired on years after the restaurant closes. Fazbear Entertainment was dead.
There is no need for you to return to work next week, as Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a corporate entity.
All debts had been paid, all assets redistributed. The company was outright dissolved. Even the memories of the horrors that had happened there started to fade away in the public consciousness. The people were gone too. William was dead, Henry was gone. A whole generation of young Emilys and Aftons had lost their lives to the horrors of the pizzeria. All of them collateral damage to the man in the bunny suit. Everyone the company had ever touched was dead and gone. Well, all except one.
Pay your child support, you deadbeats! I'm keeping the diamond ring. I also set the house on fire!
Clara Afton. She'd been there in the early days, back when things with William were good. They'd had the perfect home, a thriving business, the ideal family. But shortly after their youngest son died, things started to change. William had become distant, lost in his work, obsessive. She had watched him change from this irritatingly brilliant man that she had fallen in love with to a drunken monster struggling to hold himself together. And despite her trying to reach out to him in those desperate days, he was just too far gone.
Admit it, you wanted to let me in.
For her sake, she had to leave the relationship, and from there, she largely faded into obscurity. A mystery from William's past, a footnote in his history, and that was fine for her. She wanted to leave that part of her life behind. She tried to move forward, never wanting to hear the name Freddy Fazbear again, a time defined by mistakes and broken promises. But then, the paperwork started to arrive. As Fazbear Entertainment began to close as a corporate entity, suddenly her mail was flooded with notifications, requests, obligations. She had been there since the beginning, helping William in the early days of his business, and now, as a shareholder and sole living member of the Afton family, all copyrights and trademarks of both Afton Robotics and Fazbear Entertainment passed on to her. Memories of this past life that she had long left behind. Looking at the blueprints, the contracts, the memos, she felt old wounds begin to reopen. The regrets of a happy family that had been torn away from her. William had always been brilliant. That's what had attracted her to him in the first place. But he'd also been too blinded by obsession and pride. He was too jealous, too petty, too unable to actually see a bigger picture. But now, holding the paperwork that contained decades of heartbreak and trauma, she realized it was her turn. She was holding the power. This was her chance. And one thought resonated in her head. I will put them back together. I will put them all back together. She would be the one to rebuild this family, to rebuild the pieces of that shattered life, to reclaim the kids that Fazbear had stolen from her. But how? Looking at William's work now laid out before her, she knew that he had been onto something, collecting remnant, robotic humanoids, digital conscience transference. The pieces were all in place, they were just scattered, fragmented. It was almost like there were too many ideas going in too many different directions. It was such an important idea that she reiterated that point to herself. There were too many ideas going in too many different directions. That said, there had to be a way to save it all. She just needed to put it all back together. But how? To rebuild her family, she would first need to rebuild the franchise that had stolen them away from her. With ownership over the characters, their licenses, the technology patents, and the Fazbear name, she converted the corporation back to an LLC, a structure for smaller businesses that are usually family-owned. The irony was fitting. From there, she would need remnant, and lots of it. Remnant was the key. Clearly, in the later years of his life, William had been using Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals as a remnant farm, sending robots to kids' birthday parties in the hopes of nabbing bits of the stuff here and there. But clearly, it wasn't enough. He had, what, like 4, maybe 5 animatronics going out every week? No. It was a decent idea, but to get the remnant they required, it needed scale. Dozens, hundreds of animatronics, all out there, all gathering remnant from unsuspecting customers. But to do that would require help, something William would never ask for. William had kept everything in-house. His obsession with control limited him. Clara, though, she wasn't nearly that precious. A plan like this required partners, people outside of Fazbear to do the heavy lifting. So she contacted a mid-sized delivery company, DLZ Shipping Solutions, to help build replicas of all the original animatronics. And with meal delivery apps being all the rage, why not an animatronic delivery service? Order one to celebrate your birthday, your Halloween party. How about a 4th of July picnic? We'll invite Liberty Chica and 4th of July Freddy on over. She would make sure that they made skins for every occasion. Chocolate Bonnies for Easter, Shamrock Freddies for St. Patrick's Day, Dia de los Muertos Chicas. And thus, the Fazbear Funtime service was born.
Alright, with the Fazbear Funtime service, you'll never be alone again. You'll always have someone watching your back.
Was it ridiculous? Absolutely. Was it a sellout? No doubt. It was exactly the sort of thing that William would have hated, but it needed to be done to get enough remnant. Normally, the novelty of ordering an animatronic wore off after like, what, 1, maybe 2 times? But with new skins for new holidays, suddenly you had yourself an animatronic perfect for every occasion. It would keep people hooked. It would keep them ordering the latest and greatest that Fazbear Entertainment LLC had to offer. And all the while, they'd be collecting and returning the remnant back to her. In a word, it was brilliant. There was just one problem with it. No one trusted the Fazbear name. The company's brand was still mud in the public eye. No one would want to hire animatronics from the restaurant franchise known for murdering children. Nothing kills a party quite like the threat of death, you know. So she needed to find a way to discredit the stories that had come before. She needed to win back the public's affections, reactivate some nostalgia for the spooky stories of their childhoods.
When I cleared the path, I have
Very close to replicating artificial humans using animatronic technology. And so that's exactly what she would do. Rebuild her boy from the ground up using robotic parts. His shaggy brown hair, his favorite striped shirt, even down to small details that no one would notice, like the band-aid on his left knee. William's research had even found ways of making animatronics that could bleed and process food, making them virtually indistinguishable from a typical human. He would never have any idea of what he actually was unless he was explicitly told. The only things that could possibly ruin the illusion were any overrides to his internal systems. If something were to, say, interfere with the cameras that he had in his eyes, or cause some sort of a core reboot to his hard drive, or x-ray his metallic bones, then yeah, he would be exposed. But otherwise, to the outside world, he was just your typical, normal human boy. She worked down in the bowels of the Pizzaplex giving him life, but it was one thing to build him. It was another to help him remember his identity. He died so young, so early in their history that there was no preserved memories for him. No documentation that that she could just download into his digital brain. So bit by bit, she trained him, forcing him to remember who he was. In a corner of the room, she even made a makeshift dinner table, a reminder of their happier days. The family recreated 2 brothers, a sister, a father, and the mother at the head of the table. The one in charge, the one in command, the one bringing all of this to fruition. But his progress was admittedly slower than she would have liked. At first, he could only communicate through simple ones and zeros, then rudimentary drawings and crude letters. But bit by bit, images of his past life started to come through. Balloons, colors, houses, bears and faces, birthday parties. All for me. Gregory was alive. As the robot boy embraced her, she felt a warmth that she hadn't in decades. This was the joy that she'd been working towards. This was what it was all for. Her son, back in her arms again. The plan was working. She had to keep going. Next was William. If the family was truly going to be put together, she would need him.
But
she knew exactly where he was.
She
The ruins of that old Freddy
drove off a cliff
Fazbear's
and
pizza
died.
place where Henry had trapped him. In fact, that's specifically why she insisted on building the
She
pizzaplex
can't get
there
over her
over the
son's death.
sinkhole. It was the best place to hide what her true intentions were with the entire operation. Digging through the wreckage, she found him. He was right where she thought he'd be. Seeing the putrid shell of the Springtrap suit, though, was not something she was prepared for. The rotting corpse of William Afton was disgusting. Scorched flesh fused into the fur lining, hollow black sockets where eyes once were, a smell that reeked of burned carbon and bloody iron. He was no longer flesh. It was just the tangled sinews of a creature that was once called human. How far this brilliant man had fallen. It was clear that her work was cut out for her on this one. Afton was practically lifeless. The man may not have been able to die, but he was about as close as you could come. And his body would need a lot of reconstruction. Replacement arms and endoskeleton reinforcements were the top priority. Maybe pulled from their new line of glam rock animatronics. She'd have to see if they had any spare body parts lying around that they could steal. In the meantime, though, she threw the husk that was once her husband into a life support pod infused with aerosolized remnant to help keep him stable. But more important than recovering his body was recovering his mind. In his current state, he was comatose, an empty shell. Severe brain damage starts at temperatures over 108 degrees Fahrenheit. 42 degrees Celsius, and years of repeated fires had burned his brain to goo. Gone was the brilliant, frustrating mind that had drawn her to him in the first place. But she had a plan. Unlike her darling boy Gregory, Afton had found ways to record his consciousness. Fundamentally, the brain is only a series of electrical connections after all, so why couldn't you replicate that in the form of a standard circuit board? In essence, you could create a digital consciousness. And one thing she knew about William, he was nothing if not cautious. A planner, someone who had backup plans to his backup plans. And sure enough, there it was, buried in piles of old animatronic CPUs, a record of Afton himself.
location.
But needed someone to test it.
Someone was definitely here during the night. It had to have been the client. I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves.
Unlike the other games that she'd paid to have made in the past, this one had a different purpose. This wasn't about PR, it was about getting William back up and running, spreading his virus to the masses.
You acknowledge that Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for accidental digital consciousness transference, real-world manifestations of digital characters.
She hired a new developer, Silver Parasol Games, to scan the boards and bring her husband into the system. And because of the immersive nature of VR, William's consciousness would be able to merge with the player, giving him a new body, a new agency. There was just one complication. Afton's hold wasn't as powerful as she had hoped. He wasn't able to gain complete control. The first trial run, Jeremy, was so desperate to escape from his grasp that he sliced his own face off with a paper shredder. Messy. Afton's followers were reluctant, to say the least. But it was the second attempt that looked like it had the potential to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Enter Vanessa. Mrs. Afton wanted a surrogate daughter. Her darling Elizabeth would have been a young woman at this point if she had lived. And Clara wanted someone who wasn't Elizabeth but could be just like her. Could she have just rebuilt her like Gregory? Sure, but she decided against it because she wanted an actual human mother-daughter connection. Well, that, and it would be redundant and narratively unsatisfying to have 2 robot kids in the same family. What could she say? William had put a lot of tools on the table for her to use, and she was planning on using them all. Plus, Elizabeth had always been so loyal to Daddy. It was time to give her a second chance, a true choice. And Vanessa seemed to be the perfect candidate to fill the role.
Your dad's name was Bill? Your dad didn't play fair, did he? He used to make your mum look bad in court. He manipulated you. I know your mum after she lost the custody case.
I was supposed to be a
good girl.
She started as a QA tester at Silver Parasol Games, the VR game development company that was part of her plan to bring back William. But more importantly, Vanessa checked all the correct boxes. Right age, blonde, green eyes with a fondness for flowers and the outdoors. In many ways, it was her daughter all over again. Except it wasn't just looks and personality. What really mattered was Vanessa's mind. Underconfident, coming from a broken home, motherless, able to be manipulated. Yes. She would do nicely. She would be the one to save dear old Daddy, just as the real Elizabeth would have wanted.
I will make you proud, Daddy.
While testing the VR game, William's digital consciousness merged with Vanessa. Oh sure, she fought, fragmenting Afton's code into a series of tapes hidden across the game, trying to do web searches to regain control over her life, but it wasn't enough. She was weaker than Jeremy. She was a thrall that, despite occasional moments of lucidity, had to obey. And with Vanessa, it was a 2-for-1 deal. She was getting a daughter back, while also bringing her husband one step closer to reactivation. She just had to make sure that Vanessa was headed the right way. The reborn Gregory was an expert hacker, part of the benefits of being an Afton and a robot, so Clara had him keeping tabs on Vanessa, hacking into her emails and trailing her therapy sessions to ensure the future Elizabeth was falling in line. If any of the therapists started to ask too many questions, they were promptly
I think that's what all these big
dismissed
killers,
from
like,
their
they just can't die.
And while Gregory kept tabs on Vanessa's
like, well,
personal
like,
life,
really
Mrs. Afton made sure to clear a path for her
get remade.
professionally. With Silver Parasol's collapse at the hands of the anomaly, she then had the possessed Vanessa bring the contaminated circuit boards to DLC shipping and the Fazbear Funtime service. More glitches, more Remnant, more Afton. But it was her last move that was the best. In a true masterpiece of poetry, she brought Vanessa over to be Chief Security Officer at the Pizzaplex. A true family tradition to don the hat and badge, and all it took was a recommendation from the top as well as some emails marked for deletion. Sure, Vanessa didn't have relevant experience for the job, but when it comes directly from the CEO, does it really matter? Husband, son, daughter. A corpse, a robot, a human. All that was left was Michael. Poor, troubled Michael. The boy that killed her youngest. The one that would spend years trying to make his guilty conscience right again. A self-professed protector. While she knew she needed him to complete the family, something told her that the problem had already solved itself. Something had shifted when using Glamrock Freddy to excavate the buried pizza place.
I have been here before. I found myself for the first time when I cleared the path. I have changed. My friends are here, but I can protect you. I am not me.
Maybe it was the remnant that had coursed through Michael's veins. Maybe it was the spirit of Michael living on as a protector. But he was there, somewhere inside of Glamrock Freddy. She could feel it. And just like that, she'd won. She'd done it. Sure, there were still some kinks to work out, some final brainwashing of Vanessa, some rehabilitation of William, but they were there. Finally, all together again under one roof. The Aftons reunited. A happy ending. And that's how it could have ended. That's how it should have ended, had it not been for a few unanticipated developments. For one, something was just wrong with the Pizzaplex. Almost as if the entire building was haunted, possessed. Puppet plushies hiding on ceilings, behind crates, places that they had no earthly way of belonging. Staff bots with greasy tears down their eyes acting like they were being puppeteered by some sort of a nightmare. Even their sounds had the echo of nightmares long past.
Start clean with the power of Clorox.
It was as though a guardian spirit of the past refused to move on. As long as her husband was around, it too would linger. Only now, it wasn't just in one body, but it was in the essence of the building itself. She had seen stories of houses built on burial grounds getting possessed by angry spirits, but she'd never assumed that it could be real. Then again, in a world of living spirit metal and mind-controlling glitches, who was she to be so judgmental? The whole thing was ridiculous. Why would this be the line that she refused to cross? After all, the Pizzaplex was built over the burial ground of angry spirits, but it was the power cords that finally convinced her that something was wrong. Suddenly, these cords were striped black and white, like the security puppet from generations ago. The very foundations of this place, the materials and wires that constituted it, were rebelling against her, against the Aftons, against the quest to bring them all together again. And it was being helped by something else, something slithering through the building. Maybe they were connected, she couldn't be sure, but a blob of living wires could be heard oozing through the walls, stealing pieces and parts of the old animatronics showcased in Rockstar Row. She could only assume that it was a byproduct of all the remnant they'd been collecting. From Afton's testing, she knew that both light and dark remnant existed, one of positive emotions and the other created from anguish, anger, agony. Perhaps this thing was an amalgamation of all the darkest parts of the pizzeria's history, a collection of the hatred still housed inside these defunct endoskeletons and exosuits. As long as it was left alone, it seemed to be harmless. But if any Afton outside of Michael got too close, it would lash out wildly. Even young Gregory, looking to punish the family that had been complicit in its horrible creation. Little did she know, though, that Gregory should have been her biggest concern, that bringing the family together would have some unforeseen consequences. Gregory was normally the goodest of boys. She had literally built him that way. But lately, he'd been disappearing more and more often, disobeying her orders. Requests. She knew that he loved playing on the arcade machines once the Pizzaplex closed, being so good as to top the leaderboard on practically all of them. But lately, he was nowhere to be found. She suspected his absence had to do with Glamrock Freddy's failed performance the other night, when he malfunctioned live on stage. Almost as though the core programming of Freddy responded to seeing this rebuilt small boy. Almost like it awakened something inside of him. She'd have to make sure that Vanessa was on the lookout for him. But she'd soon come to learn that Vanessa wasn't enough. Whether it was the influence of the nightmare puppet or a reawakened hatred of animatronics seated deep in Gregory's code, something had caused him to rebel, to rip apart each animatronic in the Pizzaplex. Bit by bit, this boy was tearing down the empire that she'd so painstakingly built, freeing Vanessa from her mind control, destroying the remains of Afton in the basement, setting Glamrock Freddy loose. As her carefully created world crumbled around her one more time, she began to plot her revenge. She would have to bring them all to ruin. Okay, first let me catch you up on the big FNAF drama. Let me set the stage. It's April. All of Team Theorist over here has just finished slaving away on our massive timeline for the series. We've done it. We are on the beach, coconut drinks in our hands, eager to take a break from the franchise until Ruin's release later in the year. But nope. Scott had himself some other plans. He smacked those beverages clean out of our hands and released 3 new books: Submechanophobia, The Bobby Dots Conclusion, and Nexie. Now, normally that wouldn't be too much of a concern, right? Books tied to this franchise have been coming out for years. It's just part of the content treadmill at this point, and it's not like they tend to add a whole lot. Only one in like every 6 stories is even remotely lore relevant, and even then the connection back to the games only exists if you squint at it. But oh no, friends, not this time. Across the 3 books, story after story after story seems to have significant lore implications. And not only that, they're also much more direct in the way that the information is presented, with characters and events mapping largely one for one onto characters and events from the games. If you're not in the habit of reading these things, and let's be honest, why would you when I could just do the homework for you? What I'm talking about might be a bit confusing, so I'm just going to explain by way of example. In GGY, one of the 4 stories that set the internet on fire, a young boy named Greg, with brown hair and big brown eyes, is a master hacker who's been reprogramming the animatronics at the Pizzaplex for evil deeds, including bumping off 3 school counselors that seem to be getting too close to the truth. He also has himself a habit of being really good at the Pizzaplex's arcade games, leaving behind his initials GGY at the top of the game's leaderboards. Now, compare that information to what we get in the games. There's a young boy named Gregory with brown hair and big brown eyes who seems to be Patient 46, a master hacker that's reprogramming the animatronics at the Pizzaplex for evil deeds, including bumping off 3 therapist characters that also seem to be getting too close to the truth. He also has himself the habit of leaving the letters GGY at the top of the leaderboards at various arcade cabinets throughout the Pizzaplex. Now that right there, that is not counting animatronic toes and trying to match up striped shirts. That is about as explicit of a one-to-one parallel that you get for this franchise. So when the story also reveals that Greg's nickname is Rab, aka Dr. Rabbit, you stand up and take notice. And you know what? The internet sees it. They recognize the connections and how important the books have suddenly become. No longer am I out there on my own little island shouting into the void about using the books to inform our speculation about the lore. Finally, the internet agrees with me. To me, this is a huge step in the right direction in terms of figuring out the wider lore of the franchise. You know, there's just one tiny little problem with this. No one can quite agree just how seriously to take this lore. After years of denying the book's canonicity, there's suddenly been a massive swing of the pendulum the complete other way, where now many pockets of the FNAF community vehemently believe that these most recent stories are fully canon with the games. In other words, we're no longer talking about an alternate universe where events are similar to the games, but with slight differences. Oh no. Now the debate is all about whether what you read in the books also happened in the Pizzaplex that we play through in the games. So before we dive into into that can of worms, let's just talk about the stories themselves. I already filled you in on GGY, which means it's time to talk about the other three which tell themselves a connected timeline of events, starting with the first, the Mimic. This is the one that everyone has been losing their collective minds over. This story tells the tale of Edwin, a genius inventor and single father, and his hyperactive son, David. Basically, Edwin is overworked. Years ago, he sold his struggling robotics company to Fazbear Entertainment, who now has him hard at work turning their, quote, weird costumes into entertaining robots. With the first one that he's working on being a bright yellow chick. There's just one problem here, David. David is 4 in all the best and worst ways possible. It means that he's sweet and excitable, but it also means that he's moody and demands a lot of time and attention. 2 things that Edwin does not have. So to fix his problem and get himself more work time, Edwin creates a piece of software known as Mimic 1. Using some spare robot parts, he makes a legless endoskeleton that's able to copy everything that David does. Basically, this thing's an AI that's using David as his training data. And while Mimic 1 starts by merely copying David, pretty soon it's able to respond on its own, independently. And David loves this thing, which means that Edwin is finally able to disappear into his work. Everything seems to be going well until tragedy strikes. An unsupervised David runs out to the middle of a busy highway and is killed. Edwin is devastated, and he takes all his rage out on the Mimic, this robot that continues to behave like his son, infusing the metal of the bot with pure agony. We then flash forward in time to Edwin being gone, and the Mimic roaming the halls of his abandoned home, a brutal killer still in possession of David's childlike tendencies. So, does any of that sound familiar? Cause it should. It's Henry Emily, a genius inventor who helped create the robots of Fazbear Entertainment, a man who also happens to be a single father whose only child dies in a tragic accident when they decide to run outside, a creator whose first project was Chica. Now, that alone would be plenty of connected dots, but the story continues to hammer home the parallels between these two men. In past videos, I've talked a lot about Henry's signature animatronic design, the hinged jaws that we see on the original animatronics, as well as the Rockstar animatronics. Well, guess what? This is how Edwin decided to build the Mimic. Quote, under the eye housing, Edwin had welded in place a hinged jaw. Speaking of Edwin's robots, do you know what Edwin's first business project was? He made robotic vacuum cleaners, presumably like the ones that we see in FNAF 6. Edwin and Henry even share the same sandy brown hair color. But the other big parallel that the story gives us is when Edwin destroys the Mimic. The way this event is described is very similar to when Henry built the final Charlie bot from the 4th Closet novel. Here's how it's described in Tales of the Pizzaplex. He could almost feel his murderous thoughts pouring through his muscles, transfusing through the metal into Mimic's systems. And here's what happens when Henry builds the Charlie bot after her death. Quote from that book. When Henry began to make the 4th, his despair turned to rage. He seethed as he soldered her skeleton together, pouring his anger into the forge where he shaped her very bones. It was not Charlotte drenched in grief, it was made alive with Henry's fury. In both instances, we have men who have instilled their creations, animatronics that are literal stand-ins for their dead kids, with the pain and rage of loss. If that's not a solid connection, I don't know what is. Even from a timeline perspective, Edwin being Henry makes a lot of sense. In the Mimic, they specifically call out that he's 24 years old. After the death of his son, he disappears. But then, in another tale from the Pizzaplex, this one called The Storyteller, we meet up with Edwin 40 years later, at the point that he decides to return to the Fazbear franchise to sit on their board of directors. Again, the books make a very specific point to call out all these dates. So why? What's the big deal here? Well, if Edwin is truly the parallel for Henry, Henry lost his daughter Charlie in 1983. We're not exactly sure when he leaves the company, but we definitely know when he comes back, 2023, as evidenced by the numerical code in FNAF 6. 40 years later. A perfect match to the time frame that the books have laid out. In short, Edwin has to be Henry, which means, in a very cool twist, our early franchise timeline was almost perfectly correct. In that video, I said that William Afton's company specialized in hand-sewn mascot suits, and that Henry, when he was brought in, was the one responsible for turning those suits into animatronics. That prediction right there, that was right on the money. I was also on the right track when I said that one of the two founders had their failing company get bought out. I was just wrong about which one. In that timeline video, I suggested that Afton made Fazbear Entertainment, but eventually ran out of money and had to be bailed out by Henry. But as this story shows, it's actually the other way around. Henry was ultimately the one that was bought out. And in one final parallel between the books and the games, the story actually describes the Fazbear exec that gets Edwin to sign away his business as Portly, which connects all the way back to the Silver Eyes, where Afton was described in a similar way. Quote, Afton was as robust and lively as Henry was withdrawn and shadowy. He was a hefty man who had the ruddy geniality of a financially shrewd Santa Claus. Okay, cool, so we've got some confirmation on some early parts of the franchise, but what does any of this mean for Security Breach? Well, that's where the second Edwin story comes in, the Storyteller. In this one, we rejoin Edwin 40 years later. Because of his importance to the early days of Fazbear Entertainment, he now sits on the board of directors. A fact that does not land too well with the current head of the board, Mr. Burrows. Get it? His name's Burrows, because everyone's always connected to rabbits. Anyway, to cut costs at the Pizzaplex, Mr. Burrows decides to lay off the entire creative department, instead replacing them with a generative AI that's capable of creating new storylines for all the characters. Basically, this thing is like ChatGPT on steroids. This, understandably, upsets Edwin, who apparently has gone from engineering nerd to creative heart of the company. But he's not just a WGA member that's upset about some Writers Guild's rights. What makes matters worse is the fact that Mr. Burrows isn't using just any AI, he's installing Mimic 1, the same program that Edwin created, the one that was trained by his son 40 years prior. When they install it, it even comes in the form of his son's favorite toy, a white tiger head. And here's where things start to get real crazy. This AI controls everything in the Pizzaplex. It runs through a large central tree of wires that are connected through the walls, even tapping into things like the animatronics themselves. In fact, once the Mimic 1 program gets installed, the behavior of all the animatronics starts to change from their normal personalities into something that's a bit more like a 4-year-old. They start to become possessive. They get into tug-of-war matches over toys. They sulk in the corner and cry. David is somehow getting infused into everything that this AI touches. Eventually, Edwin attempts to shut the Mimic 1 program down, but he dies in the process. However, in his final moments, he attempts to communicate with his son inside the AI. You see, in the Mimic story, Edwin watches David communicating with his robot buddy using a made-up language described like this. Quote, David and Mimic had been doing all manner of odd little drawings that were surrounded by markings that looked vaguely like hieroglyphics. Edwin then uses this same language to communicate with the Mimic software at the end of the storyteller. Quote again, every sheet of paper was covered with odd stick drawings and strange symbols that were not at all familiar to Mr. Burrows. Squiggles, squares, loops, triangles within triangles. So why is this story such a big deal right now in the FNAF community? Well, everyone knows it's important, it's just that no one can truly settle on what it's trying to say. Which means it's time for me to do my best to try and break it all down. Now, I've already mentioned the parallels between Edwin and Henry, but what that also suggests is that Edwin's son David may just be an analog for Henry's only child, Charlie. Not that they're one and the same or following the exact chain of events, but rather that where David goes in the books, we should be looking for Charlie to follow in the games. And in the story, the Mimic 1 AI that was trained using David winds up controlling the Pizzaplex and all its animatronics via an intricate system of wires. This, to me, is the book suggesting that we should probably be looking for Charlie to be doing the same thing in the games. And wouldn't you know it, but there is a lot of evidence to suggest exactly that. Throughout Security Breach, there are wires everywhere. Black and white striped wires that look very similar to everyone's favorite possessed puppet, Charlie. There are also the staff bots roaming around looking like a twisted version of the puppet. We also see several unexplained Nightmarion plushies hidden in strange locations throughout the building, again suggesting that an angry version of Charlie may just be at work within the walls of the building. During my complete timeline, I suggested that the reason we were seeing so much puppet imagery throughout the Pizzaplex is because Charlie's possessing the building poltergeist style. Just like the house in that movie is possessed by angry spirits, the Pizzaplex is haunted by Charlie because it's built on top of the location of the FNAF 6 fire. Basically, her physical form may be gone, but her spirit is still gonna haunt the building until Afton is destroyed. And again, I think that this latest story confirms that I was close about the what, but not necessarily about the how. Charlie is still very much here, but it's not a haunting, it's technological. And look at this, the wires are even formed in such a way that they look like the trunk and branches of a tree, exactly the way the Mimic's wires are described to run through the Pizzaplex in the book. Just like David's consciousness infected everything in the Pizzaplex during the Tale story, so too is Charlie infecting everything in the Pizzaplex of the games. But that's not all. Remember that in the book, Edwin uses an elaborate code of symbols, sticks, and shapes to communicate with his son inside of the Pizzaplex. It's designed as an elaborate code of triangles within triangles. That right there, that is the wall code in Security Breach's secret room. Remember that one? If not, here's the abbreviated translation. Break and mend, I built the breath. They hunt now, drawn to life. The storyteller here is giving us a clue that this wall code, these triangles within triangles, they were written by Henry. How? When? Not sure. Honestly, we hadn't even considered him as a possible person to have written this because he was supposed to be dead in the FNAF 6 fire. But if you look at the text with him in mind, the pieces all fit. Henry did build the breath. He was the creator of the animatronics. And in all stories about Henry, we hear about him repurposing old robotic parts. He is breaking and mending them. But midway through, this coded message starts to switch tones. It starts giving instructions. Quote again, dodge, duck, flash, shoot, crawl, run, crush the vile band. Your life, your aim will save those with soul. He's teaching someone their mission. He's giving some robotic AI their instructions, just like Edwin was trying to communicate with the AI in the book. It is their task to save those with soul. But look specifically at the verbs that are written here, especially shoot and flash. This one has to be talking to Gregory. Not only is he the one that's crushing the vile band of the Pizzaplex, all of those actions are things that he performs in the game. He is the only one shooting with the Faz Blaster. He is the only one flashing with the Faz Cam. It seems like Henry, in a last failsafe against Fazbear, may have built a protector using an AI program and spoke to it using his triangle within triangle code. And that protector has to be Gregory. I know, I can't let Robot Gregory go, I get it. But how else do you explain this? No one else is flashing and shooting. And remember, the story GGY confirms to us that Gregory is patient 46, whose secret therapy tapes are played right next to where this code is in the very same room. Everything in this one room is screaming that the message is for Gregory, written in a code that the books tell us is reserved for robot brains. But this then raises two major questions. First, how could I say that Gregory's a robot when we see him in GGY as just a kid at school? And secondly, GGY makes it clear that Gregory is a villain, hacking into the animatronics and using them to kill people.
Apparently, all 3 of your former therapists have gone missing, or 2 of them are missing. One of them was found dead. The woman's body was pretty messed up. It looked like it was mangled by machinery.
Gregory's pen name for a large portion of the book is Dr. Rabbit, for crying out loud. If that doesn't scream, oh, by the way, I'm also working for Afton, I don't know what does. He even calls himself the wizard's most favorite apprentice. So how can I say that he's working for Henry when it's very clearly being told to us that he's also working for William? Well, first off, we never actually see confirmation that he's a human in the books. In fact, we largely get the opposite. Gregory is actually described in the book as, quote, an unfamiliar kid who looked a little lost at the start of the school year. So there's no past with this kid, no growing old together with a group of friends. He just appeared out of nowhere one day. What's more, whenever his friends do something odd, Gregory reacts in a very robotic way. He cocks his head and he has a weird pause in his behavior. Is that a lot to go off of? No. But also nothing about him explicitly says that he's necessarily human, or that he's just the reluctant follower of Afton. But obviously the bigger question here is how? How can he be both a protector bot and an agent of Afton at the same time? This is also a question that's raised in the books. If GGY is saying that Gregory and Glitchtrap are in control of the animatronics, but then the storyteller is saying that an AI version of Charlie is controlling the animatronics, who's actually in control here? Both of these stories feel crucial to understanding Security Breach's lore, and yet they seem to contradict each other. So what is going on? Well, for that answer, we actually have to go to the trailer for the new Security Breach DLC, Ruin. In the last few seconds of footage for this new game, we see a glitching techno rabbit, glitching between 2 colors, green and purple. This effect is known as chromatic aberration, which is when the lens of a camera is unable to focus the different colors of light into the exact same point. Usually you see this sort of thing with red and blue, sometimes red and green. Purple and green is not usually the natural color combination for this sort of effect, which means that it's trying to tell us something. And this isn't the only time we see it. If you go over to securitybreachtv.com, which has been the go-to location for all online teasers for these games, the website has the Steel Wool logo down in the corner, glitched again between purple and green. Not only that, they're reverses of each other. Not just reflections, but actually facing in opposite directions. Well, we know that purple is always going to be the villain color. It's evil. That is a given for this franchise. But green, that then, is probably the opposite color, the hero color. And while it could represent Elizabeth with her signature green eyes, what I suspect is more likely is that the green is Charlie, the color of the security puppet's eyes, the color of the wristband that she was wearing the night that she died, all green. So within Gregory, and honestly within all of these animatronics, there's a capacity for both good and evil. Glitchtrap is in the code, obviously, he's purple, but there's also a force for good, Charlie, in there as well as green. And what we're playing through is a battle between these two to ultimately decide who wins. That's why the tiger head and the Tales from the Pizzaplex story has 2 differently colored eyes. It shows 2 forces at work within the same program. This also explains why throughout the game, the other animatronics are getting corrupted, but why Glamrock Freddy isn't. He's booted in safe mode. The storyteller establishes that all the animatronics are hooked into the computer network that controls the Pizzaplex. By glitching out and then rebooting in safe mode, Glamrock Freddy is separated from that system, as well as any sort of corruption that's happening within it. And just like that, it all became crystal clear. The reason we have 2 stories telling us about 2 different sources of control over the animatronics in the Pizzaplex isn't because Scott changed his mind or because Steel Wool didn't get the memo. It's because Ruin is literally going to be a battle for control. The forces of evil, Glitchtrap, versus the forces for good, Charlie. One who wants to kill kids and use their souls to gain eternal life, and another who wants to put it all to rest and protect those who can still be saved. And Gregory is stuck there in the middle, both of them existing inside of him. Like he says himself at the end of the trailer,
"Don't give up on me yet."
AI. No, obviously AI has been the buzzword of 2023, talking about how powerful it is, fears about it taking our jobs, concerns about the ethics of it. If you read an article online, there's a chance that it's been written by ChatGPT. See some cool artwork that just won a competition? Turns out Dolly made it. Watch a cool YouTube video?
Geez, MatPat, you're using a lot of power. You wouldn't last 1 minute playing 2020 mode, which I totally beat on my first try, by the way.
There's a chance that those voices were produced by AI. But for all the talk about it, what exactly is AI? Basically, artificial intelligence intelligence is a machine's ability to think like a human. You feed the machine a bunch of data, and the computer brain is able to learn from it. It ingests all that information and then makes decisions based on that data moving forward. It actually closely parallels the way that we learn. We also ingest data from our environment and then use that data to make our decisions. And just like with a human, the more data that you're feeding into these things, the more sophisticated and well-rounded the responses become, and the more lifelike it seems. Well, within reason. You see, there's a problem with all of this. You have to be careful about the data that you're feeding it. If you aren't properly filtering the information that's being ingested, making sure that it's factual and unbiased, then bad things are gonna start to happen. If I put in a bunch of misinformation, the responses I get back are just gonna be wrong. And that makes sense, right? The computer doesn't know any better. It only knows what we tell it. But things can actually get a lot worse than that. What if I put in a bunch of hateful opinions or biases? Well, that's exactly what you're gonna get back. You're gonna get a dark reflection of that data. And we saw that exact situation play out live in real time over on Twitch last year. Back in December of 2022, one of the big trends was an AI-generated show called Nothing Forever. This show was designed to parody the old comedy series Seinfeld, with its dialogue and assets all being generated by AI in real time. ChatGPT for the scripts, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, a few others. And I gotta say, it was impressive. Not only was this thing a pretty darn accurate replica of the classic series, but it was also just cool to see how all these systems could work together to make something entirely brand new. But then one day, GPT-3 experienced outages, prompting the creators to switch over to a different AI chat system, one that was less filtered, one that was less sophisticated with its ingested data. All of a sudden, the jokes the AI was making in the show became harmful and abusive. Characters started using slurs and making hateful jokes, and the show got suspended from Twitch. Bad data equals bad results. But then, how does this all apply to FNAF? Well, each new Tales of the Pizzaplex book has leaned more and more into AI. In The Mimic, we watch as Edwin, a close parallel to Henry from the games, makes an AI program to help entertain his son while he's away at work. In The Storyteller, we watch as that same AI system gets installed and starts controlling the entirety of the Pizzaplex. In the epilogues, we watch as an AI program takes its ingested data too seriously, ripping the arms and legs off of people, wrongly assuming them to be robots. Bad data again, yielding bad results. And the newest story, The Monty Within, makes all of this crystal clear when a boy named Kane gives a presentation about the human brain. He proposes that the left hemisphere of the brain is essentially like a computer, an AI within every person. That AI is then responsible for all the negative self-talk and flaws that human beings have. Quote from the story: "My point is that AI can only use what it's given. When the AI has bad data, it can turn into something that's harmful to itself and to the systems around it." The actual theory that this guy's spouting is a little bit out there in terms of realism, but the fact that he specifically calls it the AI within is no coincidence. The new villain of FNAF is rogue AI, unpoliced and then unleashed, with us humans helplessly trying to pick up the pieces too late and getting ripped to shreds in the process. But obviously all that's just happening in the books. Nothing like this actually exists in the games, otherwise we'd be aware of it, right? Right? It has been there and it's been under our noses the entire time. If you take this knowledge of AI from the books and start to take a look back through the games, you can see Scott sowing the seeds for these ideas as far back as Help Wanted. In fact, I actually called this very plot twist 4 years ago. And again, to call this character William would be missing a huge chunk of this game's story. This isn't William. It's no longer the same guy. He's now an AI replicating the behaviors of William. To truly unpack what I'm talking about here, we have to actually rewind all the way back to FNAF VR and the origins of Glitch Trap. It's hard to remember this now, but when the happy waving bunny virus first filled our screens, there was a lot of confusion about what exactly he was. Was this the spirit of Afton manifesting within the code, or was he just a digital copy of Afton? We're told in the game that...
I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it. It was just junk. Circuit boards and things like that. Look pretty old. Somehow, though, there was usable code on some of it.
He's Afton, scanned into the system off of circuit boards, but how exactly? Afton is and was always still a human. Why would his essence be on a circuit board? Back then, possession was the order of the day. Remnant, spirits infused into animatronic parts, and so for a long time we just collectively settled on the idea that Afton had somehow managed to escape his purgatory of Ultimate Custom Night by attaching a piece of his soul to a circuit board that was buried in the spring-lock suit that he was wearing. That circuit board then got scanned during the events of FNAF VR and AR, creating Glitch Trap, a virus that would then spread throughout Fazbear's systems, eventually passing into Vanessa. The series moved on, and we all moved on with it. But I would be lying if I said that this was the cleanest solution out there. The solution implied that Fazbear Entertainment went to the burned-down FNAF 6 pizzeria, found the spring-lock suit with Afton's dead body still inside, and then just, took out the circuit board to use. Somehow I'm not convinced that the workers would have been happy to continue their job when they pry open a suit and discover the remains of the company's founder inside. And And yet, that was just the best that we had, because up to that point, that was largely the rules of the series. It was about the supernatural, not the sci-fi. It was possessions and ghosts, not rogue AI and technology on the fritz. Or at least, we didn't think the series was about that yet. But we were wrong. In FNAF World, take a look at the world map for me. It's messy, right? This thing is just so odd. It's hacked together with no transition between the lands. It's complicated with all these twisting pathways that have no rhyme or reason to them. And then also, just on a basic level, why is it so zoomed out like this? Say what you will about Scott Cawthon's game programming, but he should know enough to make a better, more usable map than this thing, right? Well, that's because it's not a map. It's a diagram. It's a blueprint of the human brain. I know that sounds absolutely insane, but just take a look at this map. And now, take a look at this map. This map of the human brain. Notice all the parallels here. A long brainstem right here in the middle where Pinwheel Funhouse is, Deep Metal Mine and Black Tomb Yard. Two smaller, rounded areas in the back matching the cerebellum and the occipital lobe. Two smaller, rounded lobes in the back of the brain. Even the twisting nature of the game's various pathways act exactly like the brain. Our brain is full of wrinkles, the gyri or curves, and the sulci or grooves. It's built that way so we have as much surface area in there as possible, which allows for more neuronal connections to happen, thereby making us smarter. And that's exactly what we're seeing here in this FNAF world map. That's also why it stays zoomed out the entire time, so we can see the silhouette. We can understand what Scott was actually going for. That white blob in front, it's either an eyeball or the frontal lobe. This, I suspect, was Afton's earliest experimentation with AI, with turning a robot brain into something truly intelligent, to try and put things back together like he promised his dying son. Back then, we weren't looking for clues to humanoid robots, but now, going back to the series and looking forward, we see those hints everywhere. Fast forward to Sister Location, there it is again. Afton literally has human heads sitting there on the desk, blinking, hidden in plain sight right in the lobby. He was trying to create people. He was experimenting with creating artificial intelligence. Either he or Henry, maybe even both of them, created an AI program to speed up the programming process, to learn the way that a human learns, to copy and bring new life to their dead children. By observing Afton, by copying him, the program was basically able to act as a second brain. Inputting bad data got them bad results, and we wound up with Glitch Trap. There's also another related possibility here. In the books, the genius inventor Edwin, parallel to the game timeline's Henry, creates the Mimic program to entertain a small child, giving it a rudimentary body so it can play and learn from the small boy. Eventually, his child dies, and Edwin abandons everything in his grief, including this Mimic program. Fazbear Entertainment rolls in to collect what was their property, and in doing so, collects the Mimic, but not before it kills a number of their employees. In true Fazbear fashion, that doesn't really stop them. Instead, they collect the parts, repurpose them, including the circuit boards, in order to create, quote, new scenarios for VR, AR, and arcade games, which is exactly what we see happening throughout FNAF VR and AR. Old circuit boards of the original games made by a rogue indie developer getting scanned into the system, child murder and all. And from that data, the system spits out Glitch Trap. Bad data, again, yielded bad results. The Mimic basically got itself a crash course in Afton. The AI is watching and learning how it should behave based on his actions, leading to it manifesting as a man in a rabbit suit. Either way, whether the Mimic program was built by Henry or William, an AI trained itself up to be Afton incarnate. Trap showing up during one of the endings of Security Breach was one of the weirdest and most frustrating things to ever happen in this franchise. We all collectively rolled our eyes and uttered his catchphrase, "I always come back," thinking, yeah, but did you really have to? It just raised more questions than it answered, like, how are you still alive? Was Henry wrong about Remnant being destroyed at high temperatures? Did Afton manage to escape the fire? It was nearly impossible to say. We had a few ideas that involved Vanessa repurposing Glamrock Bonnie's endoskeleton, but now I think we actually know the truth. And again, that truth is rooted in this AI concept. Probably the best and scariest part of Security Breach was the utility tunnels, a bunch of narrow passageways full of endoskeletons that only attack when you're looking at them. But throughout this area, there's also a lot of posters on the wall. Weird posters, all meant to teach the Glamrock endoskeletons how to behave, how to correctly hold a child's hand, how to play nicely with other kids, how to not scare a girl in a bed that has a bedspread and lamp of the FNAF 4 house. Hold on, that's not just any bed either, it's a hospital bed. Oh, that feels like it has huge implications for the lore of FNAF 4. Anyway, that is not my focus right now. The point is, the endoskeletons down there in the basement, they are being trained up. They're being taught. They're being educated one by one. Data is being ingested by their systems. My suspicion is that whoever's doing the training down there, they're trying to find the right mix of data, the right combination of inputs to get the desired output. But what would that desired output be? Afton. You see, these robots have clearly been tampered with. If you keep looking, you see one poster where the robot is being taught not to knock over the cake. But then, the act X has been crossed off and replaced with a purple check mark. Yes, we do want that bad behavior. When you see a hurt child, don't help them. But as one last reveal for this section of the game, in the big final room we see an endoskeleton wearing purple bunny ears and another purple rabbit behind him. That right there is Vanny, messing around with the new Mimic line of glamrock endoskeletons. It literally reveals her plan to turn one of them into the new Afton. She's finding the inputs that are required to create an army of evil Afton bots. She's looking for the data that produces her bad results. And that ultimately is what Burn Trap is. The body of Afton with the mind of a mimic. The epilogues of the new book series take place in the FNAF 6 location under the Pizzaplex as it's being built. A new shipment of animatronics arrive, but one of these is unlike the others, looking burnt and mangled. Since they can't put this burned one up on stage with all the other new animatronics, one of the workers decides to program it to tear the heads and arms off of the junk endoskeletons that are just lying around. This obviously goes horrifically wrong though when the little robo decides to take his programming a bit too seriously. He starts ripping the heads and arms off of anything that looks humanoid, including construction workers and later a group of teens who sneak their way in the facility. We learn, alongside the teens, that this thing is also running a version of the Mimic program, and that it likes to wear costumes. It's also physically able to contort itself into any animatronic costume or shell that it needs to, expanding and contracting to fit any space or shape that it needs, even if that space is a human body. Quote, in a nanosecond, one of the Mimic's spidery legs reached out and peeled open the back of the blue dog costume. The instant the costume was breached, the Mimic wormed its way past the edges of the matted blue fur. Shockingly, the Mimic shoved itself inside the costume with Kelly. Lucia heard a sickening crunch. So hold on a minute. A Mimic in the ruins of the FNAF 6 pizzeria that likes wearing old costumes even if there's already a human body inside? That right there, that is Burn Trap. That's why we see what are essentially new glamrock animatronic parts entwined with the old fleshy parts of Afton. It's not that Vanessa rebuilt the body and just decided that they'd make for good decoration. The Mimic is literally contorting itself to fit in with what remains of Afton inside of his existing suit. So feed an AI program a bunch of data about a serial killer and boom, you get yourself a serial killer. But feed an AI too much data, or data that conflicts, things start to get messy in a hurry. Enter Tiger Rock. In the books, AI is represented by two main creatures. One is obviously the Mimic that's roaming around in the basement like we just talked about, but the other is another version of the Mimic program, Tiger Rock, an AI that's in charge of the Pizzaplex. A tiger that, very specifically, has mismatched blue and green eyes. A very literal way of showcasing the two clashing forces that are operating inside of it. But what exactly are those conflicting forces? The book never makes it clear. In our last theory, I spoke a lot about how Edwin and his son David are stand-ins for characters from the game timeline. One of the creators of Fazbear Entertainment, Henry, and his young daughter, Charlie. In the book, the Mimic was built to copy David, and so presumably in the game, if the Mimic's there, it would also be designed to potentially copy Charlie, who was sadly killed by William and goes on to possess the puppet. And wouldn't you know it, just like the David AI taking control of the Pizzaplex in the book, that's why we're seeing puppet imagery weirdly spaced throughout the game, in puppet-colored wires, weirdly placed plushies, painted staff bots. It's an AI that's taken over the operation of the Pizzaplex, infusing itself into the very wires of the building. That's why both the books and the game have conversations written in weird, mysterious, shape-based lettering. It shows us that the Mimic program, Edwin's son, the entity controlling the Pizzaplex, the puppet, Charlie, and Henry are all connected. But while I am absolutely convinced that Charlie exists in the wires of the Pizzaplex, one thing that I haven't been able to answer yet is why all the imagery is evil. We're not seeing plushies of the marionette, we're seeing plushies of the nightmare puppet all over the Pizzaplex. The scary, evil version of the character. Why though? This character is not evil. If anything, this character is pure good. Is it because suddenly the puppet's vindictive? It's mad about being killed? Maybe it's angry that it's been summoned again to have to protect another generation of kids? No, I don't think so. In my last theory, I suspected that it had to do with Afton being mixed in with the puppet program. So you have these two competing codes, these two competing forces having to share one space, one body, for lack of a better word. And I think that I was really close on that one, but still not quite right. Think about it. Tiger Rock is very clearly meant to have a green eye and a blue eye. Green and blue. Charlie and Elizabeth, the puppet and baby. The protection of the puppet mixed with the violence and anger of Elizabeth. Throughout the books, Tiger Rock is depicted as having a duality about him. He's good and loving and fun, but then suddenly he turns sinister and threatening. There's this moment in one of his stories where he literally helps a kid like, quote, a puppet on a string. Doesn't get much more explicit than that. And yet later that same story, he just rolls up and rips the kid's arms clean off. No joke, that is how the story ends. It is very bizarre and dark. Do I have a lot of evidence to suggest that Elizabeth might be mixed in there? Yeah, I'd say I have like a medium amount. Outside of Baby's iconic blue eyes, we also have ourselves years of book canon establishing that Elizabeth and Charlie are often revealed to share the same body, most explicitly with the Fourth Closet novel. We also have this weird moment in the main Tiger Rock story where he takes the form of a white clock face. This moment comes out of nowhere and is unlike anything else else in the story. But where have we seen that sort of thing before? Sister Location and the white baby-faced clock. Let's just call it a theorist hunch. I suspect that that is why both the puppet and baby are deactivated when we see their masks in the blob. Their actual AI code, their spirits, whatever you want to call them, they're off elsewhere. They're in a separate AI entity, the wires of the building. But speaking of the blob, the AI theory also solves that one too. So Daddy AI is down in the basement, and the AI trained on the two warring daughters is fighting for control up in the Pizzaplex itself. What about the blob then? Well, the blob is just everything else. It's the mixed data. It's the AI when you feed it too much information. When you open the entirety of the internet to ChatGPT, a confusing mess of wires and information and a lot of angry people. As Glamrock Freddy says,
my friends are here.
Take a look at this description for the mimic from one of the book's epilogues. Quote, creeping out the back of the overalls-clad mushroom was an abomination of twisted and contorted metal. A mass of metal joints with wires, with one of its eyes on one leg and the other on its back. One of the legs extended from where its mouth should have been. Unlike the mimic's footfalls when it was upright, this configuration of the mimic's parts made a tisk tisk sound. A sloppy ticking that was at the same time squelching wet and dryly brittle. End quote. There is only one creature that's still around in the series that matches that description. The blob. That's right, I'm telling you that I think the blob, this confusing, weirdly designed mess that we found in the basement of the security breach, is actually one final version of the mimic. Just listen to the sounds that it makes. Its appearance and the sounds that it makes match how it's described in the book almost word for word. A twisted body that's able to grow and shrink, slither into suits, expand and contract, a mass of twisted and contorted metal parts, wet yet dry sounding movement. It is absolutely him. There's even some in-game evidence to suggest that this is more than just speculation. The Fazwatch tells us that a huge amount of power goes down to the basement. We all thought that it was meant to keep Burntrap's body alive. But what if instead it's to keep the blob alive? In the books, whenever the mimic appears, the lights tend to flicker and go out as it draws power from anything around it. That also means the ending then, where the blob scoops up Afton, it's just him ingesting more data. The Afton data. It's all the data coming together, getting mixed up, getting more complicated inside that Freddy spaghetti. It's a mimic sweep. And, as I discussed in a previous theory, it's also why I suspect that Gregory is not who he says he is in the Ruin trailer. It's the mimic still. An AI now trained by watching Gregory's behavior throughout Security Breach, hearing Gregory's voice talking to Freddy. Bit by bit, this AI is absorbing everything around it, learning from it, assimilating it. And there you have it, my friends, nearly a decade in the making, my FNAF timeline for where the franchise is here in 2023. The year of Fazbear Frights, by the way. As always, it wouldn't be right for me to finish without going over some of the more controversial takes that I just handed out. I think we can all agree that this part of the timeline was always going to be the hardest. So let me just break down some of the major points. First of all, the biggest swing, and obviously the one that everything else rests upon, Mrs. Afton being the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment LLC. Here's why I went with this route. Now, first and foremost, the head of Fazbear Entertainment is the single biggest mystery that we're meant to solve at this point in the lore. The Ultimate Guide brings it up repeatedly. Who's running the show? Who is okaying these decisions? And in the Security Breach memos, we get multiple mentions of someone manipulating things from the top down. Whoever this is, they are the person driving forward every other facet of late-stage FNAF lore here. They're the puppet master who's hiring the indie dev. They're the ones relaunching the brand, building the Pizzaplex over the burial ground. So everything at the end of the timeline relies on this one singular answer. Now, as I see it, there are two possibilities here. One, an adult robot Elizabeth, like we see older versions of robot kids in the fourth closet, or Mrs. Afton. Could it be someone completely new to the franchise? Absolutely yes, but in a game with so many returning faces and repeated themes, it would be pretty random and arbitrary. So, between these two girl bosses, who then would it be? Well, Elizabeth always wants to please her daddy, so she'd be most likely wanting to bring him to life. But then, what's Vanessa's role in all of this? Vanessa is clearly meant to be a parallel for Elizabeth. Same hair, same eyes, similar backstories, but if the main goal is getting the Afton family back together, which seems to clearly be the case in Security Breach, then there's no need for Vanessa to be involved at all. We already have Elizabeth running the show. It would also mean that we suddenly have two robot kids running around, which feels narratively repetitive and quite frankly kind of dumb. Now look at Mrs. Afton. We know next to nothing about her outside of any clues that we can get from Immortal and the Restless and Bellora's song. But what her being head of Fazbear does is make every other piece of the lore fit. Suddenly, you can have one of every other type of character. One robot kid in Gregory, one brainwashed human in Elizabeth/Vanessa, one OG corpse in William, and one possessed animatronic in Mike. Narratively, it makes everything else cleaner. Legally, it's also the option that makes the most sense. As I call out in my narrative, she'd likely have some stake in the original company and all of its assets. So as Fazbear folds as a company, I suspect a lot of it would return back to her. But there was one clue that really sold me on this particular direction, and that was this this right here, in the Post-it room, the big lore central of Security Breach, a dinner table scene with the whole family, including the mother. And not only is she there, she is at the head of that table, the position of highest honor and responsibility. She is the one in charge, with William being relegated off to the side. That one scene shows that we have to include Mom in there somewhere, and the only place it makes sense for her to be is at the top. Now, there is one big dilemma with my interpretation of all this. The Ultimate Guide really seems to point out that the head of Fazbear doesn't want the glitch trap virus to spread. They call out one particular email in FNAF AR where the legal team calls a cease and desist to all action about scanning the circuit boards. And even in FNAF VR, we're told that the circuit boards get stolen back by the client, presumably once they realize what danger is on there, trying to stop glitch trap before he spreads and gets out of hand. Here's the problem with that though: if the head of Fazbear doesn't want Afton to rise again, why'd they restart the company in the first place? Why'd they build over the FNAF 6 pizzeria? Why'd they go through an elaborate cover-up to make the possessed Vanessa an important part of the company? Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It would be the most inconsistent series of actions ever, but I did want to call attention to it since it seems to be the route that the official guide is trying to steer us towards. Moving on to minor point might be... And with that,
I think I'm about done with that one. Alright. I almost want to end it in the middle. I don't know. Don't really watch none of this. Just seeing what the, just, I don't know. Seeing if it's interesting or not. I don't really know. Real. This is only 28 minutes.
The Ferrero Rocher chocolate bar. Crunchy hazelnuts, smooth chocolate.
Hey, yo.
Five Nights at Freddy's has a pretty big story, but when you look at the games on a surface level, it can be difficult to tell what's happening when. This is particularly true when you factor in that the books, games, and the new Five Nights at Freddy's movie may have overlapping elements, but they are still their own separate continuities of events. So, with the movie opening the franchise up to those only loosely acquainted with the series, I figured now would be a good time to explain just what's going on in these games for any fans, new or old, who may have questions about the lore. So, strap in and stay tuned till the end for a special announcement, because I'm going to go over the full timeline of the Five Nights at Freddy's games. Before I get into the story itself, please note that this is my own understanding of the timeline, and due to the nature of the franchise, you and others may disagree with my interpretations. If you have any concerns about the events or placements I put forward, detailed explanations for why and how events are placed can be found in my previous videos, which will be linked in the description and noted on screen when applicable. In any case, if you watched through to the end, I hope that you'll find this timeline at least somewhat helpful in your understanding of the franchise. Our story begins with two inventors, William Afton and Henry Emily, who were living with their families in or around Hurricane, Utah. Yes, Hurricane is pronounced that way, in the late 70s/early 80s. Together, they co-founded a restaurant called Fredbear's Family Diner, where they used their skills in robotics to create animatronic characters that could double as wearable mascot costumes. Now, these weren't regular animatronics, but rather special...
Alright, that's her own understanding, she said.
Five Nights at Freddy's has...
Entire timeline. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. Comes on the right side, not the left. Well, I guess it comes on both sides, actually. Because when the lights go off, he's there.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. And the time is finally upon us. You've been waiting, I've been working, and the full, complete Five Nights at Freddy's timeline is here. I've been teasing this for weeks now, but trust me, if you know anything about this franchise, you can attest to this. It is not as simple as it seems. But the delayed release date of this video seems to have worked in my favor, with Halloween being right around the corner and the FNAF movie coming out in just a few short days. The hype is real. It makes me glad that my previous video came out when it did. But enough of that. I think I should explain how this video is going to work, because it's gonna be a bit different from the theory type type videos I have done in the past. No, instead I will be taking a more narratively driven approach. This video will be explaining the story. The original story, written by Scott Cawthon and spanning the original saga of games. Important to note, despite the fact that I am explaining the storyline of the original saga, I will still use supplementary resources that released after the game's release as evidence, such as the survival logbook and Scott Cawthon's Reddit posts. We will be going in timeline order from the beginning to the end linearly. I'm going to be putting evidence on the side so I don't get bogged down on small details, and don't worry, at the end of the video I will go into depth with evidence to explain the more controversial elements of the timeline. What I'm attempting to do is provide a clear and easy to follow storyline that would be accessible even to those of you who have never seen a FNAF video before. However, if you have never watched anything FNAF before, I have made a video which goes into detail about the games as they released, how the community grew and changed, and a lot more into detail about the history of the franchise as a whole. But if you're more interested in the story or CBA, let's quit the stalling. I will start by resolving the cliffhanger from my previous video, which just so happened to release on Friday the 13th. I'm so good with it, guys. In that, I put forward 2 different theories on which character this room belonged to, and I myself have come to a conclusion. I think that the identity of the child in Midnight Motorist is Michael Afton. Yes, I try to keep my biases hidden in my Midnight Motorist video, but I think by now most of you have figured out what my thoughts are. I think that Michael is the one who runs away in Midnight Motorist, and I think that this whole story is about him. Anger, grief, revenge, and peace. This is the story of Michael, the complete FNAF timeline. Let's get into it. FNAF World takes place nowhere on our timeline. This game
makes sense because in the movie they take Henry. Well, he takes Henry, and it doesn't make sense because why would he take his family member? Unless Michael's like maybe the son of Henry. I'm confused. I don't know, the movie they take. Or is his name Henry or is it no Garrett? That's Garrett. Never mind. I don't know. Maybe in the end he ends up being his son.
Exists tangentially parallel to all events, in a dimension separate from time. Okay, you may be looking at me weird, this may be a weird place to start, but trust me, I've got to explain this now. To put it simply, this place, this realm, is the explanation for how the spirits haunt the animatronics. I explained this in more detail in a previous video, but to massively TLDR it, spoiler alert for Attack on Titan, it's basically this place. But for FNAF. Originally, FNAF World looked like this, which is most definitely important to know, because it means that this game serves as an answer to a mystery that most people just assume to be a stylistic choice. What are the 8-bit minigames? Well, they're memories, linked to the arcade cabinets. These explain these, because they're the same. All you gotta remember is that these 8-bit minigames are the memories that haunt the arcade machines, okay? Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, which event actually does come first? Well, luckily, Scott Cawthon was kind enough to label it for us. Stage 01. FNAF 4. Fredbear's family diner and one young, crying child, relentlessly bullied by his older brother, Michael. Because they were both sons of the restaurant's owner, they spent an extended period of time hanging around the pizzeria. This proved to be unfortunate to Michael's brother, however, who gained a phobia of the spring-locked Fredbear after witnessing his father help a co-worker enter one of the suits. What is seen in shadows is often misunderstood in the mind of a child, and this child assumed something a bit more sinister was going on. This event left him traumatized, but only spurred on his brother's teasing. He started wearing a Foxy mask from the new Freddy Fazbear franchise that had started popping up around the country. His father's small diner has just been purchased by the company, and Michael could tell his father wasn't ecstatic about it. There was some form of resentment there, especially to the man in charge, Henry. He framed themselves as business partners, but they both knew who the real one in charge was. Even Spring Bonnie, his father's favorite, had been left absent in the new Fredbear's and Friends cartoon that was airing. Either way, the partnership was a success. Merchandise began selling like hotcakes. All the kids around town were playing with toys or plushies, and Michael's younger brother was left out as the only one too afraid to enjoy himself. And then tragedy struck.
Is that the bite of 87?
Was that the bite of 87? No.
Fredbear's was forced to close. The Springlock suits were taken to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and rebranded, but mostly spent their time hidden in the back room. Enter William Afton, Michael's father. He was furious, overcome with rage, grief. He wanted revenge. Revenge on children like those who bullied his boy. Revenge on Fazbear Entertainment. And revenge on Henry. One night, he was driving home and caught sight of someone out in the rain, locked out of the pizzeria. Henry's daughter, Charlie. It made him angry that he could still have a family, could still have a child when he lost his. So he pulled up, got out of the car, and killed her.
What?
Henry's daughter, of someone out in the rain, locked. Entertainment and revenge on Henry. Revenge on children like those who bullied his boy. Revenge on Fazbear Entertainment and revenge on Henry. One night, he was driving home and caught sight of someone out in the rain, locked out of the pizzeria. Henry's daughter, Charlie. It made him angry that he could still have a family, could still have a child when he lost his. So he pulled up, got out of the car, and killed her.
From car 2.
And that made him happy. Not too long later, he came up with a plan. A plan to release his sick and twisted desires. And he snuck in and retrieved his Spring Bonnie suit. He lured 5 children to the back. Follow me. 4 he killed normally, but one he decided to experiment with. He placed a child named Cassidy into the Springlock Fredbear suit and watched as her panicked breaths and screaming caused the Springlocks to snap shut.
Killed Emily?
She died.
Her?
Slowly, painfully. And William went home. But he was careless. Spotted on the cameras, William almost got caught. Luckily for him, the safe rooms don't have cameras, and coupled with Fazbear Entertainment's insistence on wanting to cover everything up, William got off scot-free. But he realized he had to be more careful. He had to be more discreet. And so, he came up with Circus Baby's Pizzeria. Not the rentals, just Baby. With Freddy's having to shut down just a few years prior, the timing was perfect. This goes about as well as you think. In another twist of fate, William had killed his own daughter. He immediately had to shut it all down. Claiming it was the result of a gas leak, he threw Baby in a vault under pizzeria. Not the rentals, just Baby. With Freddy's having to shut down just a few years prior, the timing was perfect. This goes about as well as you think. In another twist of fate, William had killed his own daughter. He immediately had to shut it all down. Claiming it was the result of a gas leak, he threw Baby in a vault underground and abandoned Circus Baby's Pizza World for good. And Freddy's was back in a new and improved restaurant with state-of-the-art facilities and animatronics. They'd spent a small fortune on these, and William was angry. This guy needs to work on his jealousy problems. However, Fazbear Entertainment made one fateful error, and that involved their decision regarding the old animatronics. You see, a lot had happened since Freddy shut down, a lot that everyone missed, and a lot that involved the security puppet. In the aftermath of his first murder, William had missed a key detail: the marionette, an animatronic that Henry had specifically designed to protect his daughter after witnessing the horrific accident that had happened to his friend's child. And protect her, it does. Not. After being covered up by a bunch of bullies, the true villains of the FNAF timeline, the puppet gets out just a little too late. And after the perpetrator had long since fled, collapses in the rain over the body of the child. Yep, this far in, and we just got our first possession, if you don't count this one, which we'll get into a bit more later. But I think we all know how it goes from here. We be giving gifts, giving life, and then bada bing, bada boom, we're back to where we were before, with the toy animatronics, retrofitted with the possessed parts from the Wizards. This, of course, makes them go crazy. I mean, obviously, who would have thought that that's a good idea? Now, whenever they see an adult, they just stare. Yo, chill. And William isn't having any of it. Taking the position of a security guard, he tampers with the mangle, which causes the bite of 87.
Was that the bite of 87?
Yes!
Freddy shuts down, and Michael turns 18. Fazbear Entertainment plans to scrap the toy animatronics, but unfortunately for them, a shady benefactor swoops in to scoop them up for himself. And I do mean that literally. The toy animatronics are broken down and used to create the fun times. But they are erratic, uncontrollable. Something about them being split apart makes them incredibly aggressive. This is when William Afton fully discovers Remnant, the substance that causes the haunting of the animatronics. Remember, we were talking about it earlier with FNAF World. And also creates the Scooper, a remnant injector, which he uses to smash up each animatronic and inject them all with each other's remnants, basically tearing them apart and slapping them back together again, torturing them. You don't know what we've been through. And this is where our protagonist makes his triumphant return. Michael Afton, now an adult, has been through the ringer. Losing his younger brother to a childish prank gone wrong, he has been tormented, both by himself and his father. Grief overwhelmed him, with the loss of his brother and now even his sister weighing on his conscience. He blamed himself and would do anything for redemption. So when his father told him to go down to the pizza and rentals bunker, he did it without a second thought. He was unaware of his father's crimes, despite being heavily abused by him, and did not realize that this command, in and of itself, was just an attempt by William to send him to his death. Upon realizing that the fun times had become aggressive beyond the point of reason, William decided that he needed more Remnant. Michael goes down to the sister location. Meanwhile, William returns to the original Freddy's. These two events happen concurrently, with William luring the children to the back room once more, and Michael slowly uncovering the sick and twisted truth. He finds out about the fun times, about what happened to his sister, and even ends up in the old springlock suit of one of his father's victims. And after all that has been uncovered, after William has broken down each of the animatronics, both of them meet a grisly end. And while William is hidden behind the safe room's boarded up walls, Michael vows to find him, and so begins his search. By the way, if you don't get what happened here, these robots have been stuck deep underground and they kind of just take everything. They're done. They're sick of it. And so have been hatching a plan. They've been scheming to make their way out. And so what they do is use Michael's arrival as an opportunity to escape by merging all together, scooping out his innards, and hopping inside to pilot him around like a little flesh mech. That's the story of Sister Location. And William just got spring-trapped. Poor guy, is what I would say if he hadn't done the same to a literal child. In Michael's time as a skin suit, a lot has happened. Freddy Fazbear's reopened. It subsequently shut down, and most of the company itself had gone under. The owner, however, seems intent in keeping one place going, maybe as a lure to bring his daughter back to him. or maybe as a contingency to keep the evil he has hidden away from everyone else. Either way, he continues to hire night security guards to look over the place for him, either unaware or complicit in the fact that this is basically a death trap for them. And one of these security guards we see to be Mike Schmidt. Afton. Nice try though. This experience proves traumatizing to him, however. As the week progresses, he experiences vivid nightmares of the time he was in the observation room. Something that happened to him as part of his father's punishments and abuse towards him in the past. He hears the phone calls and the behavior of the animatronics is imprinted on his memories, merging with the guilt he felt upon seeing his younger brother in the hospital, which was brought up by the fact that they were reunited once again. It's me. Michael meets Golden Freddy. And through the survival logbook, we see he communicates with both his brother and Cassidy. Due to the circumstance of the crying child's death, with him passing in hospital, while he does technically possess Golden Freddy, he cannot see or even operate the character. Only Cassidy can do that. And Cassidy is very angry. Michael gets flat, and Cassidy is very angry. Child's death, with him passing in hospital, while he does technically again. It's me. He hears the phone calls and the behavior of the animatronics is imprinted on his memories, merging with the guilt he felt upon seeing his younger brother in the hospital, which was brought up by the fact that they were reunited once again. It's me. Michael meets Golden Freddy. And through the survival logbook, we see he communicates with both his brother and Cassidy. Due to the circumstance of the crying child's death, with him passing in hospital, while he does technically possess Golden Freddy, he cannot see or even operate the character. Only Cassidy can do that. And Cassidy is very angry. Michael gets fired, and many years later, he is notified of a new attraction, Fazbear Fright, and sets out to fully redeem himself. Coming face to face with his father once again, Michael not only finishes this, but he helps the puppet put the pieces in place, and his brother is set free, putting on the mask just for him that had been hidden away so many years prior. But we're not done. Well, yes, FNAF 3 is the conclusion to Michael's character arc. He is completely resolved by this point. There are still a number of loose ends. Mainly, Springtrap himself, who survives, and this horrific amalgamation roaming the streets that is Molten Freddy, and Baby, and Henry. Actually, there's quite a lot to wrap up. And wrap up they do, with Henry, this first victim of William Afton, deciding to finally make a stand. He had let it bleed out into all this, but he could not sleep until it had all been put to rest. While half of the missing children's spirits had been put to rest, the other remained, tormented in Molten Freddy. Circus Baby had been kicked from the Ennard after her pro-Afton sentiments had not been reciprocated, and Lefty was constructed in a manner to lure the puppet to one final location. The place that had started it all, Fredbear's Family Diner. Now acquired by Fazbear Entertainment, this old pizzeria was tasked to be renovated, and Michael had taken up the job listing. Okay, let's do this one last time. He gets them all in place for Saturday, and then it all ends.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here by the individual you assume, although you have indeed been called.
Naj, I love you.
You have all been called here, into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection, and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. But you will never find them. None of you will. This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I am remaining as well. I am nearby.
This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still, and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours. And then, what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest, for you, and for those you have carried in your arms. This ends, for all of us, in communication.
The end. But if you brighten that image up, you'll see that there's a question mark there. Come on, man, you know we're not done. Not all threads were tied up nicely. No, one spirit still remains. The most dangerous and vengeful one of all, Cassidy. Not satisfied with letting him go, she decides to torment old William Afton, just as he tormented her. And this time it really is the end. Okay! What did you think of the video? What did you think of the style? I definitely tried something a lot different this time, but I hope it paid off. This was fun. And I think now is the time I should go into certain points of contention and back up the conclusions I reached with all of the evidence. Starting with FNAF World may have been a bold choice, but I think it is necessary to understand that these events, while definitely canon and did happen, are stylized and shown through this lens. FNAF operating in Diner. I know it's just a small thing, but I think I should justify it. Which I think takes us into my position on Charlie's death in the timeline. I put her at 2, the second.
Whoa, what?
Have you heard? It's swishy time. There, bro. It's a better mouthwash. I guarantee it.
This isn't what I would call a high-quality spiff video. Basically, I wanted to make a haha funny FNAF movie explained video, so on the 26th, as soon as I got out of the theater, I loaded it up on Peacock and just went for it. And I'm not used to recording without a chat, unscripted. My only company was a few shots of rum, hence the title of the video.
Ghost children possessing giant robots? Thanks for the heads up.
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Now, the Five Nights at Freddy's series is huge, with 8 main games, 6 spin-off games, 19 books, and a new game, Five Nights at Freddy's Help 1 and 2, dropping in November. And the story presented through all these games is less than linear, but that's always been part of the fun. These games drop little bits of lore throughout, and it's up to fans to decipher what is actually happening and what it all means. And now, with an official movie thrown into the mix, the lore is getting that much more fun, so let's break this baby down. It opens with the Universal logo, but it glitches just like the security footage in all of the games. The first person we see is the security guard trying to escape. Now, I'm guessing this is the same guy who made all of the starter calls for the first game.
I actually worked in that office before you. I'm
finishing up my last week now, as a matter of fact, so...
And to be perfectly honest, I never realized that he met such a gruesome fate. Then he escapes through the vent. Now look, vents are in a lot of the games, but they are most prominently featured in Sister Location and Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator,
they're
where
right,
the
and then
security
him being
room is
another
only
security
accessible
guard.
through the air vents.
So, for him.
Funny story. A dead body was found in this vent once.
He is ultimately cornered by Foxy, who straps him to a chair and stuffs him in a suit, which matches up perfectly with the first game. The previous security guard says,
They'll probably try to forcefully stuff you in...
Security guard says,
They'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit. So you can imagine how having your head forcefully pressed inside one of those could cause a bit of discomfort and
and when Foxy gets the security guard, he puts him in an animatronic version of a saw trap.
Do you want to play a game?
Yeah, but I wish they'd shown it instead of cutting away. They just want to be PG-13.
It's kind of bloodthirsty of you, but okay. But actually, you know what? I'm not really mad about that. The games are scary as hell, but you don't see any realistic violence. The first 3 games rely entirely on ambience and jump scares, but there's no blood. And when you actually do see violence in games 4 and beyond, it's mostly done through the 8-bit cutscene, so it's not that realistic. I think it's more true to the game to have implied violence rather than showing us every bloody detail. And yes, they were also trying to keep it PG-13. As he screams, we zoom in on a drawing of Spring Bonnie with 5 kids. Now the opening credits start and they're all in this 8-bit style, consistent with all the mini-games in the series. Then a yellow bunny animatronic picks off kids one by one, showing all of the disappearances from Freddy Fazbear's in the 1980s. Then we get a hard cut to the 6 a.m. clock, the same time you see in all of the games, and the same noise you hear in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. And then we meet our lead protagonist, Mike Schmidt, who you play as in the first game. He also shares a name with Mike Afton from Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and it has been wildly speculated that they are the same person, but I'm going to get into that in just a bit. There's a bottle of pills by his bed, which is a reference to this Easter egg in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Now, at the mall, he's talking to his coworker at a book called Dream Theory, 5th Translation. Now, this is a nod to the dream theory about the game, in which people have speculated that Five Nights at Freddy's 1 through 3 were actually a dream the crying child had while he was in a coma. But I also think that it's interesting that Mike is obsessed with dreams because of the nightmare animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Game Mike is in the only house where we see the nightmare animatronics. So movie Mike being obsessed with dreams makes complete sense. After Mike is fired from his mall job, we see him in security footage in some kind of waiting room. The security footage gives us the year 2000, which means, if this is following the game lore, it has been about 13 years since the kids originally started disappearing at Freddy Fazbear's. Mike's called into Steve Craglin's office, who is so creepy. He tells Mike about the Freddy Fazbear security position, and when Mike asks about the pay, he says that it's not great and the hours are even worse. Now this is a nod to the ending of the first game when you realize that you spent a week risking your life for $4 an hour. That night when Mike goes to sleep, we see a flashback from his childhood with his 2 parents and younger brother, Garrett. His mom tells him to watch his younger brother, but after looking away for a second, Garrett is in the back of a car driving away and he can't catch up to him. It's a small detail, but notice that the car has no license plate, meaning the kidnapper probably planned this well in advance.
Wait, does that mean?
Yes. Mike Schmidt is officially not Michael Afton.
No!
I know, it's crazy, especially because that was fairly agreed upon lore, but the Schmidt kids do parallel the Afton kids. We have a middle child who was lost too soon. In the movie, it's Garrett, and in the games, it's Crying Child who dies from the bite of 83. We have an older brother who feels responsible, and then the young...
Never explained who that Crying Child was. Maybe that was Garrett.
Youngest sibling has a deadly fascination with animatronics. Now, while I'm surprised they officially stated that Mike Schmidt is not Mike Afton, I like that they kept the same feel to the family. The next day, we find out that Abby's aunt Jan is trying to get custody of Abby, and the caseworker tells Mike to take the job so he looks better on paper. Also, take a look at the spelling chart behind her. We have words like musician, puppet, bear, bunny, fox, and chick. So Mike calls Steve back for the security guard position. As he walks up to the building, we see a sign that says Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, which is not the location from the first game, but the location from the 6th game, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. The security room matches the first game perfectly. There is the same metal fan, the empty drink cup and trash, and even the little TV. I kind of wanted to see them go up to the Celebrate poster to see if they could honk Freddy's nose.
When we listen,
There's also a little Bonnie plushie up here, and in the hallway, there's an Employee of the Month chart featuring several different YouTubers that help popularize the game. Instead of getting a first night call from the security guard, probably because he's very good to help popularize.
Who are these people? I don't know any of them. Wait, I don't recognize any of them.
The game. Instead of getting a first night call from the security guard, probably because he's very dead, the starter call is from Steve, who says,
"Just keep your eyes on the monitors and keep people out."
That seems like an understatement.
For sure, buddy. He also says the electricity in the building can be funny, which fits since the first game is about managing your electricity to keep the animatronics out of the office. He also says that you can reset the system, which is actually something you can't do until the third game. Steve also uses the same type of creepy phrases we hear in the first game.
"I will catch you on the flip side." Hopefully.
Hey, you're doing great. Most people don't last this long.
Mike then sees an old VHS tape with his name on it, and when he puts it into the TV, it's revealed to be an old security training video. Now, in the background of the workshop portion, there's Henry Emily, who is the main engineer and half-owner of Freddy Fazbear's in the book. Later on, there's a glitch where Freddy's face fills the entire screen, which is the exact same glitch from the first game. As Mike starts checking out of the office, he gets jump-scared by Balloon Boy. Now, Balloon Boy originally appeared in the second game, where he would crawl through the vents, and if he made it into your office, he would just make the entire game that much harder. Mike falls asleep on the job, and this time in his dreams, 5 kids pop up, each representing a different animatronic. The child with bunny ears represents Bonnie, the blonde child is Golden Freddy, the redhead is Foxy, notice the hook hand, and the kid with the top hat is regular Freddy, and the little girl is Chica. Now, before he can get to them, he trips and wakes up just as his alarm hits 6 a.m., signaling that he made it safely through the night, just like in the game. They also keep showing clocks. Now, this is a reference to the game's time-based nature. You only have to survive till 6 a.m., so showing us a clock that's at 4 lets us know that Mike only has to get through 2 more hours. After Mike heads home, we hard cut to Sparky's coffee shop. Now, this is a reference to Sparky the dog, a hoax character created after the first game was released. Using a fake screenshot, the rumor spread that there was actually a 6th hidden animatronic, but the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's later said that this was a complete fabrication. Inside the coffee shop, we find Aunt Jan and Max, Abby's daughter, and guess who's their waiter? None other than YouTuber Matt Pack.
Some people say that, but you know, it's just a theory.
So it turns out that Aunt Jan paid Max and her brother Jeff to find evidence that Mike is neglecting Abby, but Jeff suggests that they go wreck Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place to make Mike look bad and to get him fired. Mike goes in for his second night at Freddy's and again falls asleep. Mike has the dream with the same 5 kids, but this time he chases the redhead who cuts him with a hook, startling him awake. And when he wakes up, the entire security system is just snow until he resets the entire system, which is just like in the third game. Then Foxy flashes across the door. Now, it's notable that Foxy is the first to attack because, while Bonnie is the most active in the game, Foxy is specifically mentioned at the beginning of Night 2.
Check on the curtain in Pirate Cove from time to time. It becomes more active if the cameras remain off for long periods of time.
Hey there, human. Why does Foxy look so much more beat up than the others?
Because he's been out of commission a lot longer. In the game, there is an out of order sign permanently by Pirates Code, implying that he broke down before the pizzeria even went out of business. When Mike wakes up, there's also a brief "It's me" written on the mirror, which is one of the first game's most common visual hallucinations. An officer starts buzzing the front door, and when Mike answers, she points out that he's bleeding. The injury from the nightmare made it into the real world. And anytime the real world and dream world start to melt together, I have to give a shout out to Nightmare on Elm Street.
This is God.
Now, while she patches him up, she tells him that her name is Vanessa. Now, there is a Vanessa in the games, and she's also a security guard, or at least she ends up as one. She originally appears as a programmer in the Five Nights at Freddy's VR game, Help Wanted. Now, the lore of Help Wanted is that it's a game that Fazbear Entertainment put out to help restore its image.
We know that Fazbear Entertainment has developed something of a bad reputation over the last few decades.
And at some point in the development process, the original programmers realized there was something deeply wrong, and then they were kicked out and new developers were brought in.
The first development team had a lot of problems, made some sloppy mistakes, and was eventually pulled from the project.
Vanessa was part of the second wave of programmers, but she also realized something was off. That something trapped in the code was trying to get out. She left tapes for the player to find to warn them, but it was too late. She'd been corrupted by the code herself. She then reappears in Security Breach as a security guard who's still brainwashed and is now wearing an AI bunny suit named Vanny.
Hey, remember when you just had to close the doors if the animatronics got too close?
Yep, simpler times. She asks Mike if he's met them yet. Now, when he says no, she shows him their animatronic performance. The song they sing is super creepy and also way too on point. They literally say, close your eyes and go to sleep. We hear what you're dreaming about.
This party is all about the stab movies, come on.
It then cuts to the next day and the kids are staking out to rob the place.
Wait. Why would the night guard get in trouble for a robbery that happens during the day?
Good question, because it would make it look like he forgot to lock up. Jeff, Carl, and Uncle Hank go in and look. Well, Carl is wearing a motorist shirt like the arcade game from the Pizzeria Simulator. And also, look, there's no animatronics on the stage. That is not a red flag at all. As Carl explores the kitchen, Mr. Cupcake attacks him, jumping toward his face exactly the way he does in the games. Uncle Hank hears him screaming and hides in a supply closet, but Bonnie is behind him, a reference to how Bonnie was the only animatronic ever in the supply closet in the first game. Jeff sees the carnage through the glass of the supply closet and runs into the security office. When he picks up the phone call for help, he hears laughing, which sounds a lot like Balloon Boy. Max investigates and sees a child and follows it to the back room where he hides inside a suit. As she gets closer to investigate, a hand shoots out. Now, I don't think this is just a jump scare. It's actually a reference to an Easter egg that you could get in the third game where you could briefly see someone inside the animatronic. And then Max is lifted up and bit in half, a clear reference to the bite of 83 and 87. So that night, Max does not show up to babysit Abby on account of being dead, so Mike is forced to take Abby with him. That night, when he falls asleep, he has the same dream with the same 5 children, but this time, he manages to get close enough to the blonde kid who's drawing with a stick that looks suspiciously like an endoskeleton. He says,
"What will you give us?"
And it's revealed that he's drawing a bunny who is definitely Spring Bunny. Mike wakes up to Abby screaming, but instead of the animatronics killing her, they're playing with her.
They wouldn't stop tickling me. I said I was gonna die.
The next day, when he asks her if her imaginary friends are actually ghosts, she says,
"Of course. How else could they make the robot to move?"
We then cut back to Vanessa, who's in the pizzeria looking at the wall of pictures. As we zoom in on her, we hear laughing that slowly turns to screaming. Now, in the games, there is a lot of auditory hallucinations, and it's never clear what's actually there and what isn't. So, I'm not sure if all these noises are just in her head or if she can actually hear them. So when Mike arrives with Abby, Vanessa is still there. And then there's a really weird and sweet and creepy montage of the animatronics helping Abby to build a giant fort. When Vanessa and Mike go to the back room to get more supplies, they find a partially dismantled animatronic. Now, this animatronic doesn't look exactly like any we've seen in the games before, but she does look like an animatronic from the books named Ella. I could also see her being a take on Circus Baby, but I'm going to explain that later. As he gets closer, Vanessa says, "Don't." Now she puts a broom near the center of the exoskeleton and the locker snaps down, breaking the broom in half.
They're spring locks. They tend to be pretty unstable.
So there's 2 main types of animatronics in the game. There's the full animatronics, which only function as robots, and then there's the spring lock suits. William Afton, the big bad in the game, designed these to function both as animatronics and as wearable suits, but they were discontinued after the bite of 83. But in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, they make a brief background appearance when the security guard says,
"Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one."
After Abby is hurt by Bonnie's guitar malfunction, Vanessa tells Mike to take Abby home and suddenly gets angry that he even brought her there.
But if you ever bring Abby back here again, I will shoot you.
The next day, Mike leaves Abby home with Aunt Jan and decides to return to the pizzeria himself to dream once more. This time, however, his dream is different. Instead of just watching his brother driven away, he sees his whole family having a nice picnic together and his brother is safe. The ghost kids come up to him and their leader says,
"That's why you're really here, to change what happened?"
Now that's interesting because in the games, William Afton is obsessed with bringing back his middle child or changing the past. At the end of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, we hear him say,
"Go to Old Navy and you'll save a toboggan full of buckaroo." It's a real bada bing, bada boom situation.
This Saturday through Monday only, get 50% off everything. Online only at oldnavy.com.
Look, this deal is a steal, and so is the toboggan. I know because I stole it.
And it's speculated that all the animatronics he made for Circus Baby's entertainment and rental were to reach that goal. Like I said, this Mike is not Afton's son, but there are a lot of parallels. So it's really cool that now it's Mike who wants to change the past. The ghost kids say they can give him the same happy dream every night if he gives them Abby. He reluctantly agrees, but immediately regrets it when he sees a flash of Abby's face. He tries to take it back, but it's too late, and then he wakes up in the animatronic saw trap. He manages to escape seconds before the mask is put on his head, and when he falls to the ground, he he sees the remains of Max and her friends. Max herself is stuffed into the Mr. Hippo animatronic from the Mediocre Melodies, and look, we finally get a dog animatronic. Mike runs out of the building and barely manages to escape before Foxy gets him. And then we cut to Golden Freddy going to get Abby. Now, even though Mike took it back, it's too late. Abby is theirs now. They get into a cab with another cameo, YouTuber Corey Kenshin.
I didn't know that was him, but I was looking at that guy. I was like, he looks familiar. And I remember he was
when
that
Mike wakes up
YouTuber.
with Vanessa, she explains that when
I
5
saw it on the
children
video.
disappeared from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place in
I
the
know Mark was
1980s,
supposed to be
they
on this
searched the
too.
place top to bottom but never found the bodies because the killer put their bodies in the one place no one thought to look. The spring lock suits. It was hinted at in the first game that the bodies were in the suits. There was this newspaper clipping that reads, police contacted when parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. One parent likened them to reanimated carcasses. The previous security guard also mentions the stench the older suits have in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which is probably because of the decomposing bodies.
Yeah, gross.
Yeah, I know, right? And she knows all of this because William Afton is actually her dad.
What?
Not only that, but he's actually the one who took Garrett.
Wait. If she knew, why didn't she go to the cops? Is she helping him?
Well, it's complicated. Kind of. She clearly is terrified of him.
He really messed you up, didn't he?
But I have another theory that has to do with Vanessa's namesake in the game. Now, at the beginning of Security Breach, Vanessa is brainwashed by Vanny, and that's why she spends so much time trying to kill Gregory, since Vanessa says
he influences them somehow.
And
if he's there, I won't be any use to you, believe me.
it could be that she's been brainwashed and doesn't have full autonomy. Mike asks her to help save Abby, but she can't face her father. However, she tells him that shocking the animatronics will short-circuit their system, a lot like the shocker mechanic in Special Delivery that deactivates the animatronic. Abby gets to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, and at first, everything seems normal until Chica tries to stuff Abby into a spring lock animatronic that we saw earlier. This is why I could see her being a new take on Circus Baby. Now, like I've said many times, the three Schmidt kids parallel the three Afton kids from the games. The youngest Afton, Elizabeth, died when Circus Baby unhinged at the waist and trapped her inside. So it would make the most sense for her parallel, Abby, to almost get stuffed into Circus Baby. And Abby is an anagram for baby, and Elizabeth's spirit lives on inside Circus Baby after she dies. Mike manages to save her just in time, but as they're running away, Mr. Cupcake grabs his ankle. Abby runs and hides behind the arcade games, which is a lot like the opening scene of the first novel, The Silver Eyes. Now, as Foxy pursues her, she runs to hide in the ball pit, and just before Foxy gets her, Vanessa emerges from the shadows and electrocutes him.
It's okay.
And then, the person we've all been waiting for, Spring Bonnie, shows up. Notice how Spring Bonnie's eyes are the only animatronic eyes that are silver. In the game, all their eyes are silver, but when they adapted it to the movie, they made them red. But the scariest one of all gets to keep their original color. Vanessa confronts her father, escaping his coercion just like Vanessa escaped Vanny in the good ending of Security Breach. William pulls off his mask to confront her, revealing that Steve Cragland was actually William Afton the entire time. And then, just like he got his daughter Elizabeth killed in the games, he stabs her. Abby draws a picture to remind the ghost children what really happened, and once they do, they all surround William. Chica releases Mr. Cupcake, who latches onto William's suit and activates the spring trap. Now, this pretty much directly is lifted from Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and I have to say, it was so satisfying to see it on screen. As the spring lock slowly clamped down on his stomach, William puts his mask back on and says,
"I always come back."
Now, in the world of the movie, he's saying he'll come back as a ghost in a suit like them. But if you know the games, you know that William Afton never dies. He literally spends 30 years in a locked room hanging on by sheer will alone. The place starts coming down and Abby and Mike grab Vanessa. Now, I think this is probably a reference to the good ending of Security Breach, where Vanessa escapes the brainwashing. We cut to Abby a few weeks later, who's now doing a lot better in school and is now a lot more social. Mike and Abby also go to the hospital to visit Vanessa, who is alive but in a coma.
So get better, and we'll be here when you wake up.
So I wonder if they'll use some below-board technology to bring her back, and she'll turn into the villain that we see in Security Breach. At dinner, Abby reveals that maiming William didn't actually free the ghosts, and she says she's worried about them and asks if she can visit. Probably to avoid a fight, Mike says,
You never know what can happen.
but man, is that an opening for a sequel if I have ever seen one. Back at the pizzeria, the ghost children lock William, who is holding on for dear life, in a room. This also happens in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, so again, it's just great to see this come to life. And there's a mid-credit scene where we see Corey Kenshin in his cab once more. He says that he won't take anyone, and then guess who gets in anyway?
You mean, does he mean 3?
Corey, Freddy's 4, so William, who is holding on for dear life in a room. This also happens in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, so again,
I think it means
it's
3,
great
might be
to see this
insane.
come
I don't
to
know.
life.
That
And there's a
part didn't have
mid-credit
that
scene where we see Corey Kenshin in his cab once more.
Unless
He
I'm
says that he
wrong.
won't take anyone, and then guess who gets in anyway? Balloon Boys. I wonder if Mike is going to find him in the vents soon.
He's in the goddamn wall!
And at the very end of the credits, in a very distorted voice, we hear an animatronic spell out, "Come find me." So, do you think that voice at the end was William Afton? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And by the way, I want to shout out the writer of this video, Brianna McLarty. She did a great job. If there's any Easter eggs that we missed, you can let us know in the comments below or at either of us on our socials, which are listed below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.
So the hope is that after you prove...
What did I do?
Ghost.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Like, they explained that. I can believe that for sure. It sounds like they might have really. I don't really care too much. It's all interesting, you know. See what people can do when they work, you know, with what's in their head. You know, it's pretty cool series, I guess. Yeah. I love you, Nosh.
That's a lot of waffles.
You ate all the waffles?
Yes, I did.
Could have asked us if we wanted any.
Nuh-uh, if I give you the waffles, I won't get any.
Link, would you like a waffle?
There is no more waffles. I have them all.
I know, it's an example.
Why, yes, Rhett, I think I would like 2 waffles.
You can't, you want 2 of them?
So if Link gets 2 waffles, then I get 2 waffles. That still leaves 8 waffles for you.
I don't want 8 waffles, I want 12. I want 12 of them.
If you can seriously eat all those waffles, I will personally drive you to the store to buy some more.
I just don't know why you guys get all the waffles.
You still have more waffles.
Is that really 12?
I just...
1, 3, 4, 6. That was like 8 waffles.
I just don't know why you guys get all the waffles.
You still have more waffles than Rhett and me combined.
They're mine. I got them from the freezer and I put them on my plate. You guys are being selfish.
These not-so-sour fruits are causing a fruit fight in the patch.
Hey Donovan, you got anything to drink?
Yeah, in the fridge.
Hey Josh, grab me a glass of milk.
They don't have any milk, but I can get you some milk.
That's what he just said.
Yeah, I just want some milk.
No, you're saying it wrong. You're saying milk, like it's a disease.
How do you...
For fuck's sake. It's Fazbear's Pizza policy that all endoskeletons remain in costume at all time, as tonight.
What?
Zombie apocalypse.
I hate my job.
Well, you have to.
I despise of you robots. Yes. It's 1 a.m. Looks like we've got some work to do. Wake up. Wake up. Are you alright? Yeah. Just had a bad dream. About what? A puppet. That puppet has a name. Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you too. I'm here for you, Fredbear. Me? Why me? And how do you know my name? It's a bit of a story.
A few weeks ago, when you two were still on stage, an error occurred with you, Fredbear. Biting a child's face immediately shut you down, as well as Spring Bonnie. The 4 children who were left in the restaurant ran away, but got lured by a man in a suit. Not long after, he killed them, and ran off without anyone noticing. During this time I was a new animatronic made to entertain children. Just like you both. Being known as a puppet, I was put here as an extra because the company wanted to make more money. When I arrived here, I witnessed the incident with Fredbear as well as the children. When the pizzeria closed, I quickly rushed to the children who were murdered and held their souls until the new animatronics arrived, so I placed the souls into them, giving the animatronics life.
So, where are we now?
You are in a new pizzeria, locked in a parts and service room.
New pizzeria? Does this mean we get to perform again?
You have been... Sorry, I have to go.
Wait, we have been what? I don't trust that puppet. You think he is up to something? I don't know, but he does seem suspicious.
What is going on?
Why are we in these suits?
Where are we?
What happened to us?
I have to explain the whole thing again. Great.
Wow. I can't believe we all got killed. It's so cruel.
Yeah, what an evil man.
This ain't...
Wait, does this mean we are
This isn't what I was looking for either. What would you do? Honey. Video. Try not to laugh at FNAF.
There's B-dubs, but we're not at B-dubs? B-dubs not at B-dubs? Delivery changes everything.
What?
He right there.
The Bible. Breakfast. You question the words of the mighty Jimmy?
What? Flip? You question the mighty Jim? I heard that meme before. Years ago.
Hello, little
I'm gonna laugh.
Come close. I'll sing a song for you.
No way, I kinda feel like laugh. I don't really mind that combo.
Now I will tell you a story about a candy robot that wanted nothing more than to be a part of the upcoming Ultimate Custom Night. To the robot's delight, his wish came true, when one day, Scott Cawthon updated his website and revealed that the candy robot had been added to the roster. The robot was so full of joy that he almost exploded, but his happiness was short-lived. Later that week, Scott updated his website yet again, but the candy robot had been taken off the list and replaced with such ridiculous characters as an 8-bit crocodile and a rabbit without a face. The robot had been downgraded to a deactivated prop within the custom night office among the trash and empty animatronic shells. Now the candy robot's dreams are crushed and he will never feel happy again.
Magic! Yes. Breakfast.
What did they expect?
Woo! Who saw that coming?
Magic! I hate you so much!
Always come back.
Dad?
Yes, Barney, what is it?
What's breakfast, Dad?
No.
Well, this was a disaster. How do people enjoy this crap? This didn't even have anything to do with April Fools. How is this better than anything we have created? Actually, never mind.
Productive today and organized. Hey, remember this? My writing from 3rd grade? Yes. Want to spend the whole day reading this instead?
Yeah!
Freddy, have you ever considered being nicer to
Oh, that's off. Someone is at the door.
Oh my god,
Well, they were our... What's he doing here?
I don't know. He just randomly materialized here. Wait, wasn't Foxy supposed to show up?
Bro, it's sad. I remember watching that in the movie. Or, I mean, not in the movie.
He said he needed some alone time.
I always come back.
Have you ever noticed that the only reason this is called a Valentine's Day special is because of this heart? Stupid snap shippers.
Are you questioning?
I hate those shippers.
What's little Freddy's?
Where is the puppet?
In the band.
Great.
You won't get tired of my voice, will you?
I did 2 years ago.
Ready? Are you really wearing that shirt?
And we're off. How's everything going? Going well. Good, good. You have 12 updates. No! It's been 4 years!
So yeah, I was raised by ostriches.
I'm sure that won't affect your life. Girls, be cool.
Hey.
I'll see that to your girlfriend while the series.
It's a secret.
What are you doing? I'm playing a game. What game? Tomb Raider.
Is that petrol?
Son, come here for a moment.
Wait.
Will you ever come here? Are here any free PCs? Yes! We take all! Hey, this is a crash test of this beautiful new iPhone 7s. Okay, let's try to break it with the knife. Why is it unbreakable? Boom!
Really? Is this really how we're gonna play this one out? For real?
Okay, I'm sorry.
So your voice changed in the second one, became Irish in the third, and is now back to the original in the fourth one. This makes about as much sense as the Five Nights at Freddy's storyline.
You know people are gonna be mad this isn't the same haha funny joke and then
Sense as the Five Nights.
4 first. 1.
Nights at Freddy's storyline.
you know people are gonna be mad this isn't the same haha funny joke and then fuzz and then haha funny joke and then fuzz and so on.
The joke is so old now. Just stop. Yeah, you brought that upon yourself.
Your accent still sucks, Freddy.
You know what? I give up trying. Pizza! Shut up!
This is working out real nicely.
Is this funny? Am I funny yet? Go to the dentist and fix your teeth.
Oh boy.
Freddy's gone Super Saiyan.
And Chica's gone insane.
What is going on?
Are these enough pizza jokes?
What the heck? Screw everything! Somebody better make a really good theory to explain this one.
The universe is imploding!
Oh my god!
Dang.
Fuck. Hey! $1.99. That's right, just $1.99. Get Peacock for only $1.99 a month for 12 months.
Let's see.
Back your bloody core! You are dead! Oh, God, yes! Why? It was me! Oh, yes, I did it like this! Hey there! We got one man down! One man down! The enemy's in possession of the corpse! Grenade!
Oh, I got dead again. This game stinks.
It really smells like a public restroom. It smells like a public restroom! You know what?
When you hear me say the word here, you will make me slap my ass. Make me.
With these new lives, especially the Kermit wannabe frog over there.
Oh yeah.
Not those ones. 8 years ago. This one. Game. Oh, it's gonna be over.
For another 6 hours, all the kids went home on the night the Overwatch to the party zone. With a torch in hand, get my feet on display, with a view of every room. When I see a little movement from the corner of my eye, move quick, hesitate, and I'll probably die. Lights flicker and the shadows crawl out where the face of my enemy is. I hide behind the mask, hide behind the mask. Wait for the demons to travel by, and just don't breathe and tremble as told you before. You don't trust him because you would doubt the cheerful phone guy's voice as he chats to me about harmless mega motherfucker two just lying on the floor. But I blink for a second, he's not there anymore. Lights flicker and the shadows crawl out where the face of my enemy is. I hide behind the mask. Hide behind the mask. Wait for the demons to travel by. Just don't breathe and tremble as I pray behind the mask. Pray behind the mask.
Wendy's new breakfast 2 for $3 is so good, the crew is giving every combination code names.
I got that sauce biscuit and some Tay-Tays.
Eggman and Saucy Boy. 2 hot coffees.
No matter what you call it, Wendy's breakfast is that breakfast. Choose Wendy's new 2 for $3 Biggie Bundles.
Yeah!
I wanted to record a message for you.
Alright. Enough for today.